Notta Unified School Board of Trustees. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Trustee Millerick is on his way. He takes the bus from the city, so he should be walking in very soon here, but we'll just continue on. We want to go ahead and approve the agenda. It's the one item on the agenda. There's no consent or anything because it's a special meeting. So, board, you want to, okay?
I'll move.
Trustee Cooper is a first to approve the agenda. A second is Trustee Mack. All those in favor? 6-0, 1 absent. Okay. And I have no non-agenda public comment, so we'll just move forward. If anybody would like to speak on the item, which is the budget balancing recommendations, I already have several blue cards. They're in the back of the room. Just fill it out, bring it up here. You have every speaker has 3 minutes. We have a timer right there. Come up to the podium and we'll get started and we'll go through all the comments at one time. We'll do them all in one span, and we'll go back and forth with the board on their questions or comments that they want to make. So, okay, so let's open it up to Jens. So, Jim, you're going to start. Okay, so I'm going to turn over to Superintendent Hogaboom, who's going to start tonight's topic.
Thank you, President Butler. So before we dive into the balancing project and the budget recommendations, I want to make kind of a few opening general comments about the budget and kind of where we are. So districts are in a very difficult position these days with increased expectations and diminishing resources. In the last 5 years, our society has also changed dramatically, and the role of our schools in the community has also changed. In particular, the advent of social media, school shootings, technology advances, equity issues, and student mental health issues, including increased stress and anxiety, have all impacted what we expect from our schools, our administrators, our teachers, and our staff. In addition, the increased conflict and lack of civility and respect in our society have made it more difficult for our school staff to respond to these issues. In particular, the physical and mental safety of our students is a huge concern today. The increasing frequency of school shootings has heightened anxiety and fear for the physical well-being of our students and put a premium on safety planning, emergency preparedness, student threat assessment, conflict resolution, bullying prevention, and restorative justice. Mental health and the social, emotional well-being of our students is in crisis today, and this has been evidenced here in Novato with the fact that 3 of our senior boys have taken their own lives in the past year. The sadness, grief, and shock of these tragedies and the need to make sure that we are doing all we can to prevent future occurrences weighs heavily on all of us, and the burden is felt especially by our school staff. Putting programs in place to help us deal with student safety issues costs money. But at a time when more is desperately needed, the fact is we're having to cut our expenses dramatically. This causes frustration, anger, resentment, discouragement, and a feeling of being overwhelmed when we are expected to address important problems, but we don't have the resources to do so. Not being able to adequately deal with student safety issues is just one example of the impact of reduced funding to our school system. That is the context I would like us to keep in mind as we look at the specific cuts on the table for consideration tonight. For the upcoming school year, once again, Novato Unified is expected to lose about 100 students next year, which equates to the loss of about $1 million, so let's get about $10,000 per student, along with an increase in STIRS and PERS costs of another $1 million. Last year, we cut $2 million from the budget. Our proposal tonight is to cut another $1.5 million in costs for next year, and we anticipate having to cut similar amounts for the 2020-21 school year. I would also remind the board that NUSD is certainly not unique in facing these challenges. We're all aware of the cuts being made in the TAM district, in Larkspur, Corte Madera, and across the state. The bigger picture is the need to increase state funding to schools in California. Most sources peg California's per pupil spending at about 43rd in the nation or thereabouts, but the fact is that California is simply not providing our schools with the financial resources we need to do our job. There's a bill currently in the state legislature, AB 39, which seeks to increase the base grant amounts provided to districts in the local control funding formula. And we need to advocate for passage of this legislation. Until the funding formula for schools changes, we will continue to face the daily stress in our schools that is caused by not being able to achieve all that our community expects of us. Finally, the cuts being brought forward to you tonight have a real impact on students, staff, parents, and our community. While these reductions are necessary, I am sorry for the impact of these cuts on our staff in particular, as these are real people with real jobs doing important work in our district, and these cuts will have negative consequences for them personally. I'm truly sorry for this and want the board and our community to know that I do not take these cuts lightly, and they have been considered very carefully and thoughtfully by me and our staff. However, with declining ending fund balance caused by spending more money than we're receiving, we simply must do the difficult work of reducing our expenses, most of which are tied up in personnel costs. So with that, let me get to the gist of our budget discussion for tonight. But again, I will say that we are not being funded, adequately. We are expected to do way more than we ever were before at a time when we have less money. And there's a real toll on that and frustration, and that's where we are. So again, to bring that up, AB 39, at least, Jerry Brown basically said, hey, you're fully funded in the LCFF. We're back at 2008 levels. And I think most of us know that that's not good enough. So anything you guys can help do in the audience to promote AB 39 and increase school funding, I think that would be very much appreciated. So with that, okay, so what we're going to cover is our financial outlook. We'll review a little bit about what the Budget Advisory Committee did in the past, what our budget balancing looks for next year, and then we'll present the draft recommendations, which most of you have seen by now. So to hit our two key themes, we are losing students, and so we lose about $10,000 per student, fewer live births this year. So there you can kind of see where that is. Next year, I think we're actually down a little bit from 74 to 24, are we not? Or was that our estimate? Yeah. But we're losing about 100 students a year, and that's not expected to change for the next 3 or 4 years. So that $1 million a year will be continuing on as long as we're losing students. And when you put that together with our increased PERS and STIRS costs, you can see that back in 13-14, we're at $4.8 million. That's going to go up to $10 million, so about $6 million over the course of that time. And those are ongoing expenses. It should level off in 2021, but that's, again, about $1 million a year more in PERS and STIRS. And then the third kind of key part of that is deficit spending and ending fund balance. So over the last few years, we've been spending more money than we're taking in, and so our ending fund balance has been going down. So that's our unrestricted fund balance, which includes Fund 17. So obviously, we can't just keep continuing to spend more money than we're bringing in. So we did, the board, being that you're fiscally responsible for the district, advised us or told us to form a budget advisory committee. So we formed that in 17-18. It was a large group of people with parents, teachers, classified staff, students, and administrators. We met for 5 months. A lot of information was presented. The benefit of a budget advisory committee is you really have time to go into and explain all the nuances of the budget, which is really helpful. And you also got the variety of opinions from teachers in there, with administrators, with classified staff, so we can kind of get everybody's opinion right there in that room. So they narrowed down the ideas and gave those recommendations to me, which I forwarded to you all, and we made over $2 million in reductions for the 18-19 year, $1.5 million in program reductions, another $0.7 million from declining enrollment. But we were able to avoid teacher and classified layoffs, which was important. So this is a little harder to see, and I think you guys in the audience, there should be copies of this so you can look at it. I apologize for that, but this is a kind of a key slide because it's got the Tier 1 budget solution options, which you adopted on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side were Tier 2 budget solution options. The reason I'm pointing that out is because most of the Tier 2 budget solution items are the things that we're considering tonight. actually. So you have things like reducing security contract, closing an elementary school, reducing or eliminating contracts, reducing athletic directors from 1.0 to 0.4, increasing facilities use rental fees, and so on. So those recommendations came out of the Budget Advisory Committee. So these are the details of the budget balancing solutions for last year. So you can see that in the administrative area, we cut 2 administrators upstairs in curriculum instruction, which was our student services coordinator and an elementary coordinator. We also cut a staff position upstairs to support them. I mean, one of the things I will say that is that usually people are going to say cut the district office staff because we don't want to cut things at the school side, and it's kind of an easy target, and I think a lot of people don't exactly know what goes on here. But there are a lot of compliance issues that we have to do, and our job really at the district office is to support the school sites. So the effect of cutting some of those positions is that the work still needs to be done. It just gets put over on the school site. So one example of that is Elizabeth Olnick is picking up a lot of the gate functions that Michelle Stevens, who was the coordinator last year, did. And again, we don't have a student services person. That was Karen Valentine last year. So a lot of the SARB stuff and all that is falling on Mike Casper and Kessa Early and things like that. So the effect of cutting administrators here, sometimes a lot of the work and then ends up going out to our site administrators. So it's not like we're just doing, hopefully we're doing important things that need to be done, but that work doesn't just evaporate. We do have audits. We have a lot of compliance issues. And so I think we've been very thoughtful about cutting upstairs as much as we can. We've also heard we need to cut back on our teacher instructional coaches. So I think we used to have 8. Then we cut that back down to 7. Then we cut another 4. So we have 2 remaining. So we made those cuts. We've reduced department budgets. We cut back professional development and conference, and we reduced substitutes for PD. So totally last year, 44% of the cuts were in kind of administrative district office expenses, which was $970,000. We increased rental income by $60,000 on the bottom. Because of declining enrollment, we were able to reduce certified staffing by 7. So obviously we have 100 fewer students. We don't need those teachers. So fortunately, we are able to use the teachers who retire. So we didn't have to lay anybody off. And then there were instructional staffing changes to the formula for some of those grades levels for $280,000. We eliminated the middle school Nexus program over at Hill, and then we eliminated our discretionary gate. So all that totaled up to about $2.2 million last year. One of the other recommendations from the Budget Advisory Committee was to establish an elementary school size committee and look into the possibility of closing an elementary school. So we formed that committee in October and met through February. Their purpose was to identify the pros and cons of our current elementary school sizes, which are relatively small, review comparable school districts, determine what the ideal NUSD elementary school size is, quantify the savings or costs that it would cost to transition to the elementary school size, and then make a recommendation to the board for next steps. So their recommendation was, quote, the positive impacts on the instructional program and school culture, those were 2 of the criteria, outweigh the negative impacts on facility capacity and operational efficiency. Those are the other 2 criteria. Therefore, the committee does not recommend closing an elementary school at this time. They did also spend some time talking about some additional recommendations. One was a marketing plan, which the board approved through Target River to try to get some more students into the district. Look at going out for the parcel tax earlier with a possible increase or accelerator, and facilities rentals. So basically, I think I'd summarize that committee by saying they really were saying, let's do everything else first. They know that closing a school is a huge deal in a community, has long-term impacts. Let's revisit this in September when we see what our actual school enrollment numbers are, and basically wanted to see if those things were going to make any difference and what enrollment was. And so I really do think we're going to have to look seriously soon at closing an elementary school. You get the biggest savings for your buck, so I'll be interested in your thoughts on that. But really that's something we're planning on looking at as soon as we get those numbers in the fall. And that should still give us time if we do need to close a school for the 2020, 2021 years, we would still have time to do that. We'd make a recommendation for which school to close. We'd have to do boundary adjustments and all that. But that's where you get a pretty large, sizable savings. I'm not going to go through this whole timeline, but I think the point of this is that, we obviously do take our balancing our budget seriously. There's a lot of ramifications. So we started in the fall talking about it, convening different committees, looking at solutions, and that brings us to where we are tonight. So tonight, these are recommendations to get your input and feedback and direction, and then next week we will come back to you with hopefully a final list of cuts. So this year, we decided not to bring back the Budget Advisory Committee together. That would have been somewhat redundant. We just got done. We have the list of the first year tier of cuts. We kind of know what the second tier of cuts are. I mean, again, we're a personnel organization. We pretty much know what the next areas to go to are in terms of budget cuts. So we decided instead to, using kind of the recommendations from the Budget Advisory Committee, to do a survey of our key stakeholder groups. So we surveyed parents, our teachers, our classified staff, our students, and our administrators. And we got a great response, which is about 1,500 survey respondents. The benefit of a survey is that you can have more people weigh in. So instead of, the 30 or so people on a budget advisory committee, you actually now have responses from 1,500 people. The downside is that people don't have as much information that can be provided in person, right? So we're getting more people, and some people told us, hey, you give us too much information about this. And other people said, hey, you didn't give us enough information. How would I know if we should be able to cut a custodial staff or not? Because they don't know how many we have. So there's some things that you can get into if you have a budget advisory committee that if you send a survey out, you can't. So you get more feedback, but it's a little bit less informed because it's hard for people to know exactly what all those expenditures are for. So we got all that back. We reviewed the results with each of the stakeholder groups. So we talked to Sandy about CSEA, got input from Aaron from NFT, met with Lisa and the parent PTO, kind of discussed their feedback, met with the students, met with administrators, and they really pretty much lined up with what the results were. I mean, you've seen the results, I think, of all the different groups, what their kind of top 10 items were, what their bottom 10 were, and a lot of those were pretty consistent across the board. So Cabinet, which is myself and all of our directors and administrators here at the district office, took a long time to look through those and analyze those, and using that feedback came up with the recommendations for you tonight. So some common themes came out of those surveys. The district should pursue ways to increase revenue. The district should look for ways to reduce administrative spending, including contracted services for consultants. Community support, specialized program, and mental health services. Those two, I think, were the bottom items on everyone's list, speaking of mental health. The district should consider class size and closing an elementary school as budget balancing options, which we are. And that brings us to our current budget balancing solutions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hawkins to kind of go through the rest of the presentation in some detail.
All right, thank you, Jim. So I'm just going to go through each of the budget balancing solutions on the proposed budget balancing list and give a little bit more information on potentially the impact of those cuts or some of the thinking that went into the cabinet and our reasoning behind those. And so the first, and these are in the same categories as last year's cuts. So when we look at administrative and district office, the first is a cut in the business department. And that's a 0.6 savings, a 0.6 FTE savings of about 55,000. Of that, about 0.2 is accounting assistant position that would be reduced, that is currently vacant, and an additional .4 as we increase our expenditures in the bond and look towards potentially hiring some accounting staff to support that. Next year, looking at over $50 million in expenditures, which is about 2/3 of our general fund in terms of dollars in expenditures. We will shift some of that responsibility onto our current staff in the business office and charge that .4 FTE to the bond. The second is reducing district office departmental budgets by $75,000. This is in addition to the $30,000 that was reduced last year. And the third is closing our print shop. As we've moved more to online forms, Peach Jar, and as we've moving towards a paperless system, there's been a lot lower usage over the past couple of years, and it went from a basically revenue expense neutral program to every year costing a little bit more. This was also high on the survey and discussed in the Budget Advisory Committee for last year. The next position is a district-wide food service position. It is currently vacant. It was a decision was made to, as our participation and our numbers have gone down related to our declining enrollment, we were looking at, do we really have the numbers to fill that, both student-wise and participation-wise? And we just really didn't believe we could justify filling that position. The next is the multi-tiered systems of support coordinator. And this is an area where a dollar earned is a dollar saved. We were able to fund about $50,000 of the MTSS coordinator through a grant for 3 years. The next is reducing and eliminate professional development contracts, specifically reducing the Buck Institute PBL contract, the National Equity Project, and the Kevin Clark Consulting Project. In terms of declining enrollment, there's about a little less than $800,000 in proposed budget balancing solution, and all of these solutions do not include a change to our current staffing formula. So they directly relate to less students equals less staff under our current staffing. So certificated staffing, as with last year, 7 FTE last year. We have 170 less students this year than we did a year before. So 6.4 FTE in that, and we will also be able to cover that with retirements and resignations that we've already received by February 28th of this year. Custodial staffing, we staff our custodial based on the CASBO formula. Those staffings had not been reviewed in a few years, and as we've reduced by over 500 students district-wide and over 600 students at our elementary, that staffing showed that we were a little over 2 FTE higher than the CASBO formula. CASBO is the California Association of School Business Officials. And so those two, currently, as of July 1st, we have 2 custodial positions that will be open, so those will not require a layoff, but the positions would be recommended to be cut. The last is reducing an instructional aid position that it was a legacy position in the system, and we no longer have a staffing formula for instructional aides, and so that position would be recommended to be reduced. In terms of revenue and other allocations, the first is NCTV is a partner of the district, and they have a facility in the building. And so we're proposing charging some rent to NCTV. This was also on last year's budget advisory tier 1 cuts list. The next couple of things are really allocations and accounting, but I think they are important so that the board understands what we're doing and that we're not underfunding these potential items as we move forward. The first is our OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits. This relates to employees who, per the different staffing contracts that we have in the district, are entitled to some early retirement benefits of about $200 per month of health care. And so looking at our most recent actuarial study, along with a 5-year history of that expenditure, we felt comfortable that we could reduce that allocation by $25,000. The second is reduce our transfer to our self-insurance fund. We are self-insured, but we have basically a $25,000 deductible. We've looked at a 5-year history of that expenditure, and we believe that $75,000 or 3 full losses on our we'd be comfortable with that. As well, we have a reduction to our workers' compensation rate. This is a little bit different than we've gone back and reviewed our own allocations. This is done by the Marin Schools Insurance Authority, which bases their rates on a actuarial study by Aon. And based on that and our XMOD, which is our experience modification, we have reduced our level of workers' comp significantly over the past 4 years. And so we received a reduction last year, and we found out that we are going to get another $70,000 reduction in our overall premiums for next year. So that's included in revenue and other allocations. As we move on to site and district-wide support staffing, the first is eliminating one IT support position, and this is a site-level, district-wide support. And so moving that, we'll likely have to look at changing the little bit of the model which we had. But given the reduction in number of students in that area, staff believed that that cut was appropriate. The second is reducing the athletic directors at each of the comprehensive high schools from a 1.0 FTE to a 0.8 FTE. A couple items about that. The parcel tax and our contract with NFT support a 0.4 FTE athletic director at each of our comprehensive high schools. In addition, the athletic directors receive a 26% stipend for additional hours and days worked. This was on the Budget Advisory Committee's Tier 2 list, and currently we are the only public school in Marin County with a full-time AD, although some of the other districts do have some other potential clerical staffing and other things supporting those programs. The food service sub floater, we've had a real time. We have a real need for substitutes in our food service program, and this was a really great idea that we had come up with CSEA. We believed that would really help out. The problem is we just haven't been able to fill this position. It's been over a year, and we still have not been able to find somebody to fill this position. So as subs are difficult to find, also finding a sub floater became very difficult to find. So our recommendation is to eliminate that position. The next is to reduce the North Bay security contract. The current contract is a little less than $250,000. And this is a wonderful partner, obviously, that we worked with when the city of Novato discontinued the school resource officer program about 10 years ago. One item of note there is that we have re-implemented, along with a partnership with the city of Novato, the school resource officer, and we have 2 officers focusing on the high schools in that program. The next is discontinuing payment to the MCOE, which is the Marin County Office of Education, for fees for BITSA, for that's beginning teacher support. And really what that is all teachers are required to what's called clear their credential. And so after they get their credential, they have to do a certain number of continuing education hours, and with a mentor. The district would continue to pay for the mentors in this case, but the Marin County Office of Education used to provide this service for free, and they have been steadily increasing it to full cost over the last 5 years. And we're one of the very last districts in Marin County to still provide this benefit. So that was the reduction there. And then the last, in terms of programmatic, is reducing school site discretionary allocations by 15%, and that's about $10 per student. So to kind of put that into perspective around that. End of this calendar year, we haven't increased our facility use rates in this district for 10 years. We also will be bringing online in the next 2 years an athletic facility at Novato High School, 2 performing arts centers at the 2 comprehensive high schools, which will also need to be considered in reviewing and looking at those rates. The second is to perform a review of our independent study and continuation schools in 2019-20. On a per student basis, we spend a lot more on these programs, and as these programs are more costly in general, we still believe we need to perform a review of really the model of those programs and look to see whether they should be potentially contracted or potentially expanded in order to get more, be more efficient as we run those programs. The last is reviewing and reducing overtime where possible. I think it was, if you saw on the list, there was about $55,000 of overtime in our system, which actually for an organization this size is very small when you take into consideration that we have to have an on-call maintenance person on the weekend when issues come up, and various times when there's going to be a little bit of overtime. But this is an area that if there is excess that we do need to look into and cut, so we will do that as well. This slide represents a 2-year summary of the budget cuts by area. And as you can see, the area in gray on the screen is 2018-19, the cuts that were implemented into this year. And the purple is the 2019-20 proposed cuts. And so the 2 largest areas relate to administrative and district office cuts of about $1.5 million over the 2 years. The almost equal to that is the savings and budget solutions related to declining enrollment with no change in the staffing formula, and that's just under $1.5 million. And then instructional staffing, where we had to change the staffing formula, about $280,000 from last year. Programmatic, a little under $200,000 last year, $75,000 this year. Site district-wide staffing, support staffing, we didn't cut any last year, but $250,000 is proposed this year. And in terms of revenue and other allocations, we had about $60,000 last year and $132,000 proposed for 2019-20. Overall, when you look at the categories that they fall, I think the important areas to look in is declining enrollment. No change in staffing formula was about 37%, and administrative/district office reductions are about 38%, a little over 1.5 million. So together, those are about 75% of the overall implemented and proposed staffing, and then 25% in the other areas of instructional staffing, site and district-wide support, and programmatic. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions from the board, either to myself or Superintendent Hogaboom.
Okay, so what I would like to do is come to the board first, and if you have any clarifying questions, nothing too lengthy, because I'll come back to the board. We have some audience that would like to speak. We want to hear from them, so that takes a little bit of time to get to. And for those who wandered in a little bit late, please fill out a blue card. They're on the back table, and bring it up to Sally here. You have 3 minutes to speak, and we have the timer there, and you just want to call your name, just come up to the podium, and I'll usually call 3 names at once, and you just go in that order. And once the timer goes off, if you could wrap up your comments, I'd appreciate it. So before we start, though, I want to ask Superintendent Hogaboom, there was some items, or Yancey, there were some items that were weighted high on the through the survey. And if I know this board, we probably read every comment that we could read and went through the survey. We analyzed it. We're really good at that. And there were a few items that were high, and we do not see those on this list. So if you could speak to some of that, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you. So there were, we kind of did a summary of all 5 stakeholder groups and kind of did the top 15 and the bottom 15 and all that, and took a look at it. So there were probably 3 specific items that we did not recommend that were in people's top 15. One was the director of communications role. The second one was board health and welfare benefits. And the third was increasing class size. And that was framed increasing class size by 1 at like K3, 4, 5, middle school, and high school. So let me talk just real briefly about each of those. The director of communications role, I would say, has become almost crucial in the district. You know, we have 4 priorities: student success, staff success, equity, and community engagement. So the director of communication, really with communication, does an incredible amount of work with that. I'm not going to list everything, but youth truth surveys and LCAP surveys, videos, social media posts, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, website updates, marketing strategies, coordination with local newspapers and Target River, publicizing district accomplishments and achievements, including Modeling the Way, NISA Awards, Golden Bell, that kind of thing. Being the key liaison with North Marin PTA, School Fuel, Novato PD, student advocacy councils, and student board members. Helping with district newsletters, post to websites, the rollout of School Mint, board highlights, bond updates, and then assisting with board relations and board packets for meetings. And then the second key thing that she does really is around school safety. So she really heads up that for our office, whether that's emergency planning and preparedness and connecting with Novato PD and North Bay Security, and also with our emergency planning consultants. And then she's also the key communicator in the case of emergencies. So if, like when we have the fires and we come in early, is there going to be school? Is there not going to be school? Getting those communications out early in a timely fashion. So I think a lot of people really don't know what the communication department does. And, you know, we try to be transparent. We try to get our information out there. We want to communicate with everybody. And that really is a full-time job. Parceling that out would be really, really difficult. So that's why I did not recommend that being cut. The second is board health and welfare benefits. So the board does get about $8,000 per person at least last year in terms of health and welfare benefits. So that's dental, vision, and health. The board, if you don't know, also gets a stipend of $200 per month. So they get $2,400 per year. What I would say about that is that we want the highest quality candidates serving on our board, as they have a huge responsibility to oversee the district. As the person who works most closely with board members, I can tell you that the quality of the board overall has a direct impact on the quality of our district in all respects. It is imperative to have strong and competent individuals who understand their role as a board member and who also have the 6 C's: strong communication skills, strong organizational skills, cultural competence, collaboration, critical thinking, conscientious learner, and character. While the small stipend and the benefits are obviously not the reason that anyone runs for the board, I don't think, they are a small reward for the time and energy that our board members put into our schools. All board members put in many hours visiting schools and classrooms, back to school nights, attending meetings including school PTA and boosters meetings, DLAC meetings, dual immersion, LCAP, School Fuel, North Marin PTA, concerts, drama productions, school fundraisers, and many others. In addition, with board meetings 2 to 3 times a month, board members spend an average of 2 hours each preparing for meetings in addition to the 3-hour meeting itself. This is in addition to our board retreats, which are a minimum of 2 times a year. So in short, cutting the board health and welfare benefits will eliminate one of the only positive rewards that we offer for the service and leadership of our board of trustees. And I think that would be a short-sighted decision to take away one of the few benefits, because I want the best people possible sitting on that board. The last one is increasing class size. That was on everybody's list in the top 15 except for our teachers. But for parents, for CSEA, for students, and for administrators, that was in the top 15. But one of our directives is to try to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as we can. And so increasing class size, even by one person, makes that a little bit more difficult. So I did not go with any of those recommendations. But I will say that, you know, with the fact that we're going to have to keep going with these cuts, with the way things are going to go in the future years, I think we're probably, at least next year, going to have to look at increasing class size. Because again, most of our costs are cut up in our people. So just increasing class size by one, which isn't a huge amount, saves us a lot of money, and that's something we'll probably have to look at for next year. But that's why I didn't recommend that for this year. So those are really the top three that were in most people's top 15 items, and that's why I didn't recommend those.
Okay, thank you. Back to the board. So Trustee Mack?
Just one question.
Yeah.
I'll keep it short so I can get to
Okay,
the blue slips.
that'd be great.
But just a clarification question for you, Yancy. So if you could pull up the, just the cuts that shows all the detail. That one, yes. FTEs. So when I do the math in my head, I got 13.77, sound right?
It's about right, yeah.
Okay. And then about I think I've got 9.4 via attrition. So the real true reduction outside of attrition would be 4.37. I just want to make sure I've got that right.
That's about right. There are still moving parts in that with potential retirements, potential resignations as we move through as a system of over 800 employees. So, but yeah, I think that number is that would be the maximum. Yes.
Right. Okay. So then the maximum. Okay. So then to be clear, that 4.37 of potential actual cuts might even be lower if more attrition is factored in if it comes up.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. That's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Anybody else with a clarifying question? Yeah, McKenna?
Are the SROs being funded by the district this year or still by the?
Great question.
So in the current year, the two SROs are being funded by the city of Novato on a one-year agreement. And in the future, the school district will be paying for one of the two SROs. Although we have received a grant to help us fund those for the next few years.
All right, I'm going to go to the comment cards, if that's good. Okay. So we have about 13 here, so that's definitely over a half hour's worth of public comment, which is fine. I would just say if somebody comes up and speaks and you've heard your comment made and you're fine with that, just raise your hand and say you can pass, and we'll move on to the next person. So just to move things on, but we're here to listen to everybody for sure. So I'm going to call up the first three: Mark Schmidt, Ross Sargent, and sorry, I'm not able to read this. The last name is Adler Ivanbrook? That's me. Oh, sorry. What's your first name? I apologize. Okay, and you've been here before, and I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I think so. So those are the first three speakers.
Okay. So my name is Mark Schmidt. I'm a senior. My son is a senior at San Marin High School, and I'm just here to mention that I'd ask that you guys consider not cutting back on the athletic director positions. Obviously, the athletic director has a lot of administrative responsibilities. Oh, you're talking. All right, there we go.
The meeting is being recorded. So,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. So the athletic director obviously has a lot of administrative duties to take care of, and when you have a good athletic director working at the schools, the athletic programs run very smoothly. And there's a lot of benefits to that. And in fact, over the past few years, as we have, after y'all put in place the full-time athletic director, I've seen a lot of improvements at San Marin. I've seen improved communications amongst the athletic departments and programs, which has involved more parents because of that communication. I've seen better coaching and mentoring of athletes. I have seen more qualified coaches, and I've seen more time spent on college recruiting for athletes. And you know, I want to just highlight a couple of those areas. One thing, the superintendent mentioned wellness. Wellness is a key benefit of the athletic programs. And when coaches have the time to do their coaching and be mentors to the students and athletes, I've seen them take on drug use. I've seen them take on behavior problems and push on students to keep their GPAs up. I mean, my son is a student athlete who is going to go to play college baseball, and I had no idea. I mean, I knew GPA is important, but I really had no idea. And with an athletic director really pushing that for the students and the coaches through the coaches to the students is really critical. I mean, I had no idea how truly important GPA and academics are in terms of moving on to a collegiate sports program. Another thing I want to talk about is a little about the college recruiting process. Historically, it's been an area that's been somewhat underserved without a full-time athletic director. And as a result, a lot of students have gone to Marin Catholic because the belief is that Marin Catholic delivers results. Well, as I said, my son is going to go to Pomona College to play baseball, and that's quite an accomplishment. And he wouldn't have been able to accomplish that without the support and help of the athletic director and his coaches. And in fact, San Marin has placed 5 student athletes in college this fall. And that is, I've asked around, and nobody can remember a time where they've had 5 student athletes be placed in college. And that has a lot to do with the effectiveness of the athletic director and their coaches. And so by cutting it is going to cause problems. I had a few other things to say, but in conclusion, I just want to say that I believe a full-time athletic director is a revenue generator and not an expense. And what our athletic director needs to do now is promote the fact that San Marin is delivering results, and Novato Unified District does have the chops to send students to college. Thanks.
G'day. My presentation, first thing I want to say is I want to just say thank you so much, all of you guys. It is super hard what you're doing, and it's got to be gut-wrenching, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank you, Superintendent Huggaboom, for the work that you're doing. And so I would like to offer my comments as a form of analysis on what has been offered, and in the spirit of hopefully increasing debate over what it is that you guys are doing. So the first thing is, I want to just tell you my thesis. The presentation that was offered by Superintendent Huggaboom and Mr. Hawkins makes total sense to me from an accounting point of view. But I feel I must advise you that it does not make as much sense from an economist's point of view. So I want to make 3 points. 1, I want to introduce myself. 2, I want to actually explain why the NFT credentialed folks bear the burden of this cost-cutting measures, and to finally offer consider an objection you might make, which I could then basically answer for you. So that's what I hope to do. Wow, 40 seconds, okay. So 1, I've been a practicing economist. I teach at Novato High School in government and economics, and I have taken a real interest in this. So let me just say this. The first thing is that nowhere in the proposal was mentioned the fact that credentialed and teachers took a 2% cut in real wages. Okay? The Bay Area cost of living is 4.5%. And the cost of living adjustment that was offered to teachers and credentialed folks was 2.5%. That is a full 2% less than what it does to cover wages and the cost of living in the Bay Area. That, by the way, that 2% difference makes anywhere between $1 million and $1.5 million worth of difference. I do not see that on the actual accounting measures that you offer. So when you factor in that $1 million to $1.5 million dollars. We're talking about administration being somewhere in the vicinity of about 25% of the cut, and basic impact on teachers and credentialed folks of somewhere in the vicinity of somewhere between 66 and 75%. I just want you to dwell with that. Now, there has been an argument that has been made that would tend to argue that. I only have 23 seconds, I cannot make that in this time frame. However, if you guys are interested in hearing my analysis, I would be happy to share it with you. Safe to say, it has to do with the way in which the district deals with step pay increases, which are considered for the most part to be something akin to a cost of living adjustment, and they are not that at all. They are a cost adjustment, a cost adjustment for productivity. And that is the way that they should be looked at, okay? Because the two things in them, one, the experience, and two, the level of education that is inherent in the STEP program for teachers and for credentialed folks, represents productivity. If your teachers are more productive, you pay them more. If I was to ask you, who would you think would be more productive? A beginning teacher or someone who has been a teacher for 15 years and has increased their level of experience and has increased not only that, but also their educational attainment so that they're a master of their subject? Who would you think would be the more productive teacher? And the obvious answer will be the one with more experience and more educational attainment. Does anyone disagree with that? So if you don't, the thing is, the argument has been made that credential folks and teachers, basically, they get that step addition as well. And the fact of the matter is, you should be leaving that harmless. Why? Because your teachers are actually providing you with higher productivity. The last thing you want to do is to actually cut their wages in real terms, even though they're becoming more productive. Anyway, I will leave it at that, and thank you very much for your time and for your indulgence, and I apologize for taking more time. Thank you.
Madam President, can we monitor the clock?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your noble service to our community. Just want us all to realize that. My name is Ross Sargent. I'm a San Marin graduate and a parent of a student athlete at the school and another who will be there in a few years. I'm the school's all sports boosters president. Our team exists to facilitate and optimize educational experiences for San Marin students. Accordingly, we are very concerned when we hear that you're considering an FTE reduction for our town's 2 high school athletic directors. ADs keep students learning both in the classroom and out of it. They do this by coordinating the myriad moving parts of high school athletic schedules and collaborating with their counterparts, doing the same thing at other schools. They do this in order to provide our students with an efficient and worthwhile developmental experience. That is to say, an educational experience, a leadership experience, a college launching experience, a reason to stay in school experience, a mental and physical wellness experience, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. This is crucial work, so crucial that to do it right is a full-time job, at the very least. Part-time ADs deliver mixed results. Part-time ADs teaching classes full of students are notoriously difficult to work with, unreturned phone calls, emails, etc., as they're typically and understandably stretched between teaching multiple classes first while coordinating with other high schools and managing budgets and equipment and the like. To settle for a part-time AD is to settle for the substandard, and in NUSD's case would be the incorrect decision. Substantial portions of the AD work, some purchasing, some scheduling, conflict resolution, after-hours game, and event supervision, would shift to the school administrators or other teachers while focus on the students themselves in and out of class would be distracted and diluted. This body recognized this reality several years ago and voted to markedly improve Novato education by funding 2 full-time ADs. This relatively small financial obligation paid large dividends in the classroom and served to stem the outflow of Novato students to regional private schools, with more robust athletic departments. Note this year, San Marin girls soccer, boys wrestling, and its championship football team earning the highest GPA awards in our California Interscholastic Federation NCS divisions. A reduction to part-time athletic directors would save a few $1,000s, but it would epitomize the age-old saying, penny wise, pound foolish. We know this body is wiser than that. We trust you will act courageously and preserve the full educational opportunities for our students. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Azella Metzger, Nani David, and Mimi Nielsen. And before we move on, I just want to acknowledge all the emails this board received and know again that we do read each and every one of them, even though some of them were somewhat repetitive, but that's fine. We look at everything. We look at the who sends them, everything. So typically the board president, its protocol is to respond back. I stopped responding today, so I apologize, but they were coming fast and furious, and I would have sat at my desk all day long. So, but we want to thank you for sending those and acknowledge that we did receive them.
Hi, I'm Azella Metzger. I think I know most of you. I'm currently chairperson of the San Marin School Site Committee and one of the independent community members who served on the Elementary School Size Committee. And some of you may also remember me as the PTA president at Hill Middle School the last time a school closure was considered and acted upon in 2011. I know you have the elementary school size committee report telling you that the committee recommendation is to keep all of the elementary schools open. So I would like to give you my perspective because I don't believe my voice is represented in the committee report. Back when the board made the decision to close Hill 8 years ago, there were a lot of angry parents, myself included. This all came from an emotional place, and I think most of the anger came from the abruptness of the process, how the closure was handled, not necessarily the actual closure itself. 8 years removed now from that closure, I don't think anyone who was angry about the closure back then will tell you that it was not the right thing to do. The elementary school size committee was comprised mainly of parents and teachers at the elementary schools, all who have a stake in keeping their school open. Ross Ingalls and I were the only ones who didn't have skin in the game. I understand why the committee was comprised with these members, having lived through the Hill closure, and I commend Superintendent Hogaboom and his staff for trying to be inclusive of all the stakeholders. However, I don't believe the committee, comprised as it was, would have come up with any other recommendation than to keep all elementary schools open. The declining enrollment in the district is not something we can change enough with a marketing campaign. If you were to take the enrollment at just one of the elementary schools and spread it out among the remaining schools, you would have enrollment numbers at all elementary schools at about what it was 5 years ago. I don't remember anyone complaining that the elementary schools were too crowded 5 years ago. There were comments in our committee discussions that some schools had stronger parent support than others, and we would lose that support if we were to close a school. I strongly disagree with that. Involved parents will be involved wherever their kids are. Hill Middle School closed, and I and the rest of our board jumped right over to San Jose and Sinaloa and put in the work. As I look at the other budget cuts under consideration, the one that jumps out at me most is the reduction of the high school athletic directors. 4 years ago, I was part of the NUSD Athletics Task Force with 25 other parents, coaches, athletic directors, students, and Dr. Hogaboom and Chris Koska. We met several times over the month of March 2016, and the main takeaway from our board report was that each high school needed to have one full-time athletic director. You might want to take a look at that board report to remind yourselves how important we felt a full-time athletic director was. You as a board agreed with us, and by June of that year, we were conducting interviews for a full-time athletic director at each high school. One of the elementary school size recommendations was for revenue generation marketing to retain and recruit students. I posit that one of the main places we lose students is a transition from middle school to high school. Strong high school programs, including sports, is a retention feature. Giving up a full-time athletic director is not the way to go. In fact, the cuts that are done to the high school level have a much higher spotlight and will negate any campaign that even the best marketing firm can come up with. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Nani David. Am I started? Oh, I'm Nani David. I am Tech 3, and I'm currently working at San Marin High School, also fulfilling the site tech duties. So I'm kind of pulling double duty at my job right now. I'm up here speaking today because I wanted to speak to the elimination of the IT funded position here in the budget, and just to preface that, say that I really strongly disagree with any sort of classified cuts or staffing cuts, because we're the people who keep the lights on at the school, and I already know how stressed and overworked most of us are. In specific, the IT department has taken on more and more work over the years. Right now, Sandy, close your ears, but I already stay above and beyond and volunteer with the school as far as providing IT advice and IT support for additional functions just to make things work. And some of the feedback that I've gotten from teachers and parents and all sorts of stakeholders is that they really value the fact that we support IT in this district. My workload has increased probably by 40% as far as the site duties with the One to World program. There's quite a bit of paperwork that is involved with that. Tracking assets and troubleshooting that goes above and beyond what I've been able to train my student techs to help out with. So there are still quite a few duties and extra work that's been placed on us. If you eliminate an extra site technician, then it falls on the rest of us to be shuffled around. And when we are taken away from our schools, then some of the valuable things that we provide as far as support for after-school functions, interfacing with our administration, working with our students, that becomes much more difficult for us. I know the technician who is the lowest on the seniority list and who is scheduled to be eliminated, might possibly be subject to these layoffs, and he is an amazing tech. So not only are you potentially affected at all, in fact, people are really upset but I won't speak personally for any of them. Now you're losing some expertise out of your department. So when it comes to matters of student safety, there are many times when I'm working with a camera system and I will go to that very specific tech and ask him for help, and he's pulled through on many an occasion. So when we look at that actual elimination of that position, we're losing quite a bit of expertise and support for things like student safety. So I would just like to encourage you guys to consider that when you're making the budget cuts.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mimi Nielsen, and I wanted to thank you all for your service. I serve as PTA president at San Ramon Elementary, and I'm going to be serving on the North Marin Council PTA and 16th District PTA, as well as a board member on school fuel. So I've been talking to a lot of my parents and friends about these budget cuts, and I know we're not as educated on this topic as a lot of, obviously like Yancey and Jim. We don't understand a lot of it, but and no cuts are palatable. But a lot of people were very concerned about the averages from the data collected. Like you said earlier, why the top 10, which were very heavily weighted in all the surveys, why are they not reflected in these budget cuts? I think 1 through 12, there's only 5 items on this list. 12 through 29, there's 0. And 29 through 45 on the list, there's 9 items. One of those items being the reduced athletic director. I have no stake in that. I have 2 elementary school-age kids, but I was a college athlete. And I know from my personal experience that having an athletic director really helped me get into college and stay on the straight and narrow. So I just wanted to say that I think that's super important. And also North Bay security contract. For me, school safety is one of the most important things. For my kids, when I'm dropping my kids off at school, I want to feel like they're safe and they have the best, the safest situation possible. And I know that what is going to be cut from North Bay Security is the drug and alcohol counselor, which I think would help, is something that is tremendous help. They also help with cyberbullying. And I think that cutting that would be a huge disservice, especially to our young people who, I know our suicide rate, we had 3 suicides in the last year. And I think that having a counselor who's helping young kids like that, she could be saving so many more from getting to that point. So anyways, that's just my 2 cents. And like I said, I know no budget cuts are palatable, but I just know you guys will make the best decision. Thank you.
The next 3 speakers are Ross Ingalls, Jim Hickey, and Kelly Delgado.
Good evening. My name is Ross Ingalls, and I'm a parent of a Novato High School sophomore who plays on the varsity softball team and a 6th grader at San Jose Middle School. I've been actively involved in my daughter's education and the NUSD since my oldest daughter entered kindergarten. I worked closely with district staff and community members on the facilities master plan and boundary study in 2011 and 2012. I was the co-chair of the Yes on Measure A parcel tax campaign in 2013. I was the LUCET and PTA president in 2012 and 2013. I'm on the parcel tax oversight committee, and most recently I served with Zella as the at-large community member on the elementary school size committee. The entire time I've worked with and been involved with Novato Unified School District, we've been talking about declining enrollment and the effect it would have on district services. In 2011, Director Shader and Associates was hired to complete a boundary study as part of the facilities master plan. In this boundary study, they related that due to a declining birth rate and the lack of any major new developments in Novato, the district could expect to see declining enrollment through at least the 2021 school year. It is now 2019, and as expected, there are about 600 less students in our district than in 2011, and enrollment is continuing to decline. As Superintendent Hogaboom outlined in his email yesterday, due to the dual impact, and I quote, due to the dual impact of state-mandated increases to employee pension costs and a lower enrollment due to declining birth rates here in Novato, we are continuing to run a budget deficit. In his email, Superintendent Hogaboom also attached a list of proposed budget cuts that we went over tonight. Unfortunately, none of those budget cuts that he is proposing address what he cited as the reason for the budget deficit. I'm disappointed to see that one of the proposed budget cuts is to reduce the high school athletic directors from full-time to 0.8 FTE. ADs are an integral part of the overall success of high school athletic program, and for many students and families, a successful athletic program is an integral piece of the overall high school experience. The high school athletic director's job is complex and time-consuming, and any cut to hours to that position will likely place a larger burden on the individual sports coaches who are already paid very little for the number of hours that they're spending. Any cut to the high school athletic director position shows a lack of commitment by the district to the student athlete. Last month, the district approved a nearly $50,000 contract with a marketing firm to help market the district to prospective students. When this contract was announced, Superintendent Hogaboom was quoted in a February 19 Marin IJ article saying that the marketing campaign would be considered a success and would have paid for itself by recruiting just 5 new students to the district. I would argue that a successful athletics program at our high schools would be a better marketing than any boilerplate campaign that a Southern California marketing firm can come up with. Remember that Super Bowl quarterback of the Los Angeles Rams, Jared Goff, went to both Pleasant Valley and then Sinaloa before leaving the district and going to Marin Catholic for high school. I don't know Jared and I don't know his family, but I think if we assume that athletics was not at least a factor in his decision to leave the district, then I think we're not looking at the big picture. Imagine the free PR that we would have gotten as a district if Jared were wearing a San Marin jersey instead of a Marin Catholic jersey in all the photos that CBS showed during the Super Bowl broadcast. Declining enrollment is not a surprise and something the board has known about since at least 2011. It's time that the district stop making small budget cuts that are just Band-Aids but don't address the actual problem. With less than 600 students than we had in 2011 and enrollment continuing to decline, it's time for the board to seriously consider the responsible, organized, and well-managed closure of an elementary school. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Hickey. I grew up in this town, been here since 1969, and I'm a product of the Novato Unified School District. I went to West Novato, which is gone now, so I had a closure. My school closed. Then I went to Sinaloa, and then I went to San Marin, where I graduated in 1985. Back in 1985, everybody else has kind of pretty eloquently put why we need an athletic director. I'll tell you from a student standpoint, and I'll tell you from a coach standpoint now. And that's where I'm going to focus my time. As a student, we were champions in 1985. We were undefeated in our season. Year before that, we fell off, but 3 years before that, we were champions every year. We had people that I am dear friends with now. I love Marin Catholic. I have nothing bad to say about them. But what I will tell you is, when I graduated, people were fighting to come to San Marin and Novato rather than go down to Marin Catholic, because they wanted to play with the kids they went to school with. To echo your Jared Goff statement, I think that's very possible that could have been if San Marin had or Novato had a dynamite team, like we did just a few years ago at Novato. Novato had an incredible state championship team. These are all affected by the athletic directors. I'm friends with our athletic director. We've done a lot. But as a coach and a full-time employee somewhere else, we have over 75% of our coaches donate their time to the school. Are we paid? Sure. But every check I've ever given has been given back to the sport that I'm coaching. I'm coaching lacrosse right now. We've done it for the last 4 years. Our membership is up over 3 times what we started with. Just fell down a little bit for a couple of reasons. People wanting to enjoy their senior year, apparently. But the reality is, I went from 14 students up to 34 students. That grade point average on that team alone is now at a 3.0. We work very hard, but I cannot do the job that we're doing with the coaches that I have if I don't have an athletic director. I bleed green and gold if you cut me open, but I am the biggest Nevada Unified School District fan you can imagine. Both my boys have gone through this organization, and you guys do a great job as a board. I can't thank you enough, and with these trying times and trying to figure out these things, I would be remiss if I did not stand up here for the athletic directors at both Novato and San Marin. I think they're both incredible schools, and by having those guys and allowing us to do our coaching job, to recruit other coaches as well, that's where it is. I coached here when there was a part-time athletic director, and he quit. Then we had Greg Pitty, who is an angel upstairs now, but he was an angel at the time too, because he worked his butt off. He didn't have kids. San Marin was his kids. He recruited all of us. We turned a fledgling football program around in 1 year, and we've been in the playoffs ever since. Lacrosse, we're hoping to go to the playoffs this year. We've got a big rivalry coming up next week, so hopefully you all come out. But the reality is, please save our ADs. They do an amazing job, and they need to stay with us. Thank you very much.
Hello. My name is Kelly Delgado. I am a parent in the Nevada Unified School District, and I'm also the Nevada High Sports Boosters Vice President. I'd like to start just by saying thanks to all of the members of the board and to the Budget Advisory Committee for your time and efforts. I know the output from the survey presented the board with many options to consider, and I think increasing class size by 1 student should be considered. It's a very popular choice, I believe. I know that a lot of the PTAs support that, and they know what's going on in the classroom. I see a recommendation to eliminate several lower-level district positions, however, not one for a higher-level position at the district office for somebody making over $100,000 per year, and I'd like to know if that's a consideration. I'm not sure cutting back on aides, campus security, food service positions is being considered, why it's being considered before cutting someone who makes 5 times those positions. These individuals really improve the lives of many of our students. I also would like to suggest that we remove some of the $295,000 worth of professional development consultants. We could look at creating an internal mentor program. We work and live in Marin County. Many people here are very skilled and educated, and I'm sure that we could do both in the district and the county some mentoring in place of that. I would also like to know how much of the budget is being allocated to board members. I know that it is a small amount that you receive directly, and I do appreciate your service. However, I do know that board members receive not only compensation, but benefits and retirement. And in this day and age, no retirement benefits? Great, thank you. I needed that because that is being shared, and if it's not true, that's helpful to know. Okay, so I want to say that our PTAs are providing our schools with copy paper, and I'm saying yet it's being suggested that discretionary funds be reduced. $10 per student isn't a lot of money, but if you add that up, I know that our students, our administrators fight hard to decide how that money gets spent, and if you take it out of the site, it comes right out of the parent pockets that are already overtapped. Several years ago, the district determined one of the middle schools should be closed. That was talked about earlier. I think it should be considered again. I want to say that we're talking about declining enrollment. I personally know 3 parents who are teachers. Their kids do not go to school in our district. They go to private schools. 15 students in my immediate neighborhood go to private schools. I don't think we don't need a consulting firm. Just ask any of the PTA members, parents. There's lots of us will tell you what we can do to make things better. I'm going to cut down to the chase. We lost 3 high school students in the last 18 months to death by suicide. I think that cutting back on good role models is tragic. I think that our athletic directors are key and critical to our sports programs, and sports programs are key and critical to our students' lives. I just think that we really need to selflessly consider what's truly best for our entire community, and cutting back on the athletic director is not a good answer. Thank you.
Thank you. The next 3 speakers are Michael McIntyre, Scott, I think it's Kennedy, and Richard Torres.
Just got the clicker. Thank you. Haven't been here a while. My name is Mike McIntyre. It's nice to see a couple new faces here. I'll try to keep it brief. When it comes to budgets, decisions in general, obviously it's hard to please everyone. You rarely do, if ever. And in this situation, you probably will please no one. I don't envy you in this position. I won't echo the things that have been said already. I'll just add that the sports programs at the high schools are not just about those star athletes that may go on to college. So, those are going to be pretty rare. The real benefits are with the other kids that get to be part of something, sometimes bigger than themselves. It's the community that we build. And at Novato, we've had our difficulties with some of the athletic directors, but the one we have now is really stepping up and coming into her own, and it would be a shame to clip her heels right now. We need that support to keep this going because of the marketing, because of the community that we build and the benefits we get from it. Thanks.
Good evening. I apologize for the way that our train of thought as a whole isn't swaying to, well, we make these cuts and more people will volunteer to do the job. And I hope we're not going down that direction. Reason being, I've been in education for 23 years now. I've been an athletic director for 18 years. So I'm speaking solely as an athletic director who has 4 children here in Novato, 3 of which have all gone to San Marin, all student athletes, love the programs, love the coaches, love the parents. There's so much dedication here. It's absolutely wonderful. I'm in the inner city in San Francisco, very, very different, complete opposite situation than what we experience here. With that said, student athletes, I'll just round it out. 1,000 students at Mission High School in San Francisco, 400 of them are athletes. Of those 400 athletes, majority of them are coming from single home families, lower socioeconomical, et cetera, et cetera. Athletics keeps them involved. It keeps them in school. And that is the same process here, not to the same numbers, of course, but there are kids in our district, whether it be Novato or San Marin, that they're going to school for athletics. You take away that athletic director who is the key holder of all these different avenues, and it is not going to be successful. You're going to put all this responsibility on a principal or an assistant principal or an administrator to do all this other extracurricular activity and whatnot. It's just not going to happen, and we're really going to take away from our kids. We're really going to, and that's the sole purpose of me being here. I just want to say how important it is and what a need it is for our students and our student athletes and our community as a whole. So I ask you, and I ask everyone here, please support our athletic directors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Mark Gilardi and Bill Welch. Oh, Mark, you're good. Okay, Bill, here you go.
Can I have their 3 minutes?
No.
No?
You know better.
This actually will save you money if you let me talk for a couple more minutes. I thank you, board members, for allowing me to be here today. I was really torn about coming and even speaking. This is very difficult. I bleed black and gold. Sorry about that, Hickey. I went to Novato. I have 5 kids that have gone through the system or are in the system now. My father was a school administrator. I bleed Novato as well because I was a police officer in Novato. Regarding the ADs, everything that was said is great. The Novato High AD I knew when she was really tiny. I went to school with her father. They're troubleshooters like I am. I called both of them when I saw that CPR had to be a mandatory thing for your seniors to graduate. They stepped up, worked with scheduling, worked getting the gyms ready. We finished up San Marin, and currently we're actually at Novato High this week getting your seniors so they can graduate with that AB that requirement that they had. You want to talk about saving money? Your attendance is down, your chronic absence is up. You increase your attendance by 1%, that's approximately $700,000, right? So for the last 3 years, I've been banging my head against the wall saying, why aren't the schools utilizing North Bay Security Group for one of the 100 things that we do? If we do more home visits, we sit on more student attendance review teams, we get these kids to come to school, you increase your attendance by 1%, that's $700,000. Now, maybe we could work out a thing. If I increase attendance by 2%, I get 1.4 million. Can we do that? So, all kidding aside, we are probably the only consultant in Marin County that actually makes money for you if we're utilized correctly. I'm not sure why the administrators haven't been doing that. I spoke to Mr. Hogeboom. We actually talked to ADCO, all the administrators saying, please use us. The other concern I have is the SROs, being a police officer, I understand what their role is, but they don't work every day. And I was kind of told, well, next year you really don't need to be at the high schools. I don't think Mark would like that much because we do a lot of things for the high schools. The SROs aren't there every day. They're at training, they're sick, they work 410s. They're not on campus 8 hours a day. So even though I've been kind of told, hey, you don't really need to deal with it, being dedicated that I am, I'm going to still be there when they need us. So you know the history of North Bay. I don't need to go through that. I was called Thursday night saying be here Friday to come up with a proposal to make a cut. The cut would be my mental health counselor. That maybe we can find another avenue to support that role. Mental health is very important to me as well. That's why 8 years ago when I came to you, Haas Grant was actually funding that position, and you saw the importance of that, and the school district picked it up. So my role is to support the kids and the staff, and I'm going to be here no matter what you decide, but I just wanted you to know that if you look at the numbers, it makes sense to really focus on attendance and chronic truancy. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one card left, and it's Jimena. You didn't have to fill a blue card out. You're an automatic. Yeah. So.
Okay, I just wanted to quickly give a student perspective on the whole AD situation. So I'm Jimena Lara. I'm a senior at San Marin High School, and I have been playing on the girls' varsity soccer team since my freshman year, which was the year I met Dennis Davis. Over the past few years, I've watched him grow into an impeccable athletic director. The amount of time he dedicates to San Marin sports is unbelievable and should not go unnoticed, which is why I'm here tonight to speak in support of him. One fun thing about Davis is that he is extremely hard to find on campus. One would assume that he would be in his office most of the day, but he's usually out and about. He's very active in his role as athletic director. For example, I see him at every sports game, making sure that everything's under control, and I know how difficult it is to schedule sports games. It is a huge part of San Marin athletics, and he does a great job at it. Davis has always been welcoming. He wants to see students participating on sports teams. For example, you can always find him at tryouts, encouraging kids to get their physicals done, as well as their concussion tests. He does everything he can to make sure that every student gets a chance to play. He cares about every player, and he has always been so supportive. Last year, Davis stepped up to take on the role of full-time athletic director, and I can honestly say I've seen him do an excellent job. It's so important for student athletes to have access to a full-time athletic director, and it makes a difference. His work ethic is unmatched. He has earned this position, and he deserves to keep it full-time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimena. The last people I want to ask, Mark Brewer and Mark Sims, would you like to come up and make any statements before we turn it back to the board?
Good evening. Thank you. It is apparent that our San Marin High School community believes the Nevada Unified School District supports extracurricular activities. The largest extracurricular activity serving our student population is that of athletics. The board has identified that athletics is a valuable part of a student's growth and development, and this is supported within the research. Tim Cohen, 2007, states athletics teaches essential life lessons, working with others, earning what one desires, managing setbacks and adversity, and feeling a sense of community. These areas, as gleaned from the research, suggest interscholastic athletic participation would support our students' meeting areas within our graduate profile, included but not limiting to character, collaboration, and conscientious learner. Our school community expects a full-time dedicated leader with a vision to make this possible. The board has also shared their desire to support academic achievement. The skills just mentioned also assist with one's academic growth. Studies suggest student athletes outperform their peers not participating in interscholastic athletics. Currently, San Marin student athletes earn a combined GPA of 3.49, with approximately 60% of our student population participating in athletic programs. Our school community expects a full-time dedicated leader with a vision to make this possible. The research regarding the elimination or cutting back of the athletic director position and the supports the position provides for successful athletics has also been documented. The publication Athletic Administration in 2018 indicated that additional responsibilities and cuts to funding have increased, while the responsibilities to staff and students have increased or have not changed. The Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association in 2016 found that athletic directors contributed to the longest workday amongst all staff in the United States districts. And according to Krosky, Fowler, and Smith in 2018, the athletic director's role has changed significantly, with legal and safety concerns, marketing, booster management, personnel, and eligibility consuming far greater time that was once required, and expected increases are on the way. Given the potential financial impact of not providing effective oversight and supports related to safety, marketing, personnel, and eligibility, we are discouraged that there would not be a full-time dedicated leader with a vision to make the leadership and management of these areas possible. Given the body of research available and what has been shared only scratches the surface of the importance of the athletic director's position, the San Marin community urges the Nevada Unified School District Board of Education to consider the negative impact of any action taken to eliminate the full-time 1.0 FTE of the athletic director's position. And we ask that the board demonstrates the forward thinking and vision so that we may continue to enjoy the successful participation and academic and athletic achievements our student athletes so richly deserve and have demonstrated under the guidance and leadership of our full-time athletic director, Mr. Dennis Davis. On a personal note, I have coached under or supervised 9 athletic directors at the high school and college levels, with 2 of those individuals earning State Athletic Directors of the Year awards. Mr. Davis's leadership and commitment to San Marin High School and the Nevada Unified School District is far greater than that of any athletic director I have served with or will serve with in my career. Thank you.
Members of the board, thanks for having us here this evening. I would echo what's been said across the board. You've heard a lot of information about the value of a full-time athletic director in a high school. I would tell you that between the arts, performing, visual, and athletics, they're just vital to the success of a modern-day high school. The support that it provides for students is outstanding and exceptional. Our current full-time athletic director, Ms. Sander, does an outstanding job with organizing athletics, keeping on top of things, doing all the technical work that it requires. But I would encourage you to watch her mentor children every day in our school. And that's what touches my heart. She sits with students and changes their lives and dedicates her time to ensuring they're not only a good student, they're a good athlete, but they're a good person. And she reinforces the 6 C's on a daily basis. So I have utmost respect for that, and I need to see that position remain and would support seeing it remain full-time. So thank you.
Great. Thank you to both of you. All right, let's bring it back to the board. Yeah, Trustee Mack.
Actually, if I can have principals, just ask some questions. I can just say Mark, and I got it covered. Principal Sims, if you would. You made a great observation about the hours spent by an AD. Can you quantify what you've learned in terms of the typical FTE load for an AD, either in our district or what you've read about elsewhere?
Are you asking me to quantify their monetary value or the
No,
hours
I'm
worked?
sorry, their FTE level. So, they're obviously budgeted at 1.0 FTE, but are they truly working 1.0? Are they working 1.2, 1.4, 0.9?
Well, I'll do my best. If
Sorry
a
to put you on the
1.0 is 8 hours, then each athletic director serves as a 2.0 because they're typically working 16 or more hours answering texts, emails, and their other responsibilities. They never get to put the phone away. There's always a parent concern, a student athlete, travel. There's just no way to measure how much time Mr. Davis or Ms. Sander put into their efforts. But if you asked me to, and you did, I would say they're worth a 2.0.
Last question, either one of you can answer this. Should these positions be cut to 0.8, where do you see the coverage coming from to cover that gap? Or do you? Do you know?
I would say don't cut it to a 0.8. I support keeping it full-time, and it will fall somewhere. It'll probably fall between us and assistant principals in the school. And given that, we have things to do, is it possible for us to do that? Absolutely. Do it as well? Probably not.
We'd been ineffective trying to do our duties and serve the athletic student athletes from all the roles that have been mentioned, including the mentorship that both athletic directors provide for our students. It's just not possible.
All right, anybody else? We're here with the budget solutions being presented. Trustee Gaston and Trustee Millerick.
Back and forth on some of these issues. Over the past, maybe 10 years, 8 years, as the economy's slowly improved, am I on? Yeah. We've been able to add programs and improve the offerings that we've done at the school district, one of which was additional athletic directors, one of which was when the Novato Police Department didn't provide service to us, North Bay Security stepped up and did work beyond what was available before. We've added other programs. We've expanded project-based learning. We've expanded technology in the classroom. We've added additional. Same hit every other business did, and the money isn't there to support the teachers, all the teachers in the state of California who have earned the right to have a sound retirement program. It's legally required. It isn't like U.S. Steel or General Motors where they just said, sorry, we're out of business, bankrupt, or some of the stock companies. So the states increase the amount of money they take out of the local budgets to fund that retirement program. And as has been pointed out, that's been very painful because every little bit of money that comes from the tax base has gone back to fix the pension problem that's left over from 10 years ago. So here we are. What I don't want to end up doing is, and it's been in the news recently, is the Oakland School District and the issues they're facing. They basically went into bankruptcy 15 years ago or so, and in the process, they had a 80,000 student enrollment. They borrowed $100 million, and they had somebody come in and run the district, and the new model for the management of the district was let everybody move to a charter school. All the kids that went to charter schools were not part of the solution to pay back the $100 million. So half the population of students have to pay back that money, and it's breaking their back. And I suspect that even in spite of their labor contract that they just signed, they're going to be in a position to be facing bankruptcy again. I don't see how they're going to get out of it. We do not want in Novato to get to a financial position where the state comes in and takes us over. Because what happened to Oakland will happen here. Somebody will come in who cares nothing about, did you graduate from San Marin? Do your 4 kids go to San Marin? Does my daughter graduate from San Marin? How long have I lived in the community? They're going to be brutal, just as they were in Oakland. And programs got torn apart that served those kids. Oakland kids got very, very poorly served by having a trustee come in, an outside trustee come in and run the business. So we need to do things to keep ourselves solvent. We have to run in the budget we've got. This is a business. We're not the federal government who can just print money. We got to live within our budget. I think we ought to look at the list of things we added and over the last 10 years, some of it with his athletic directors, some of it with his additional athletic programs, some of it is other programs, outside consultants who have come in to do public relations and other activities, project-based learning. I think we have to go back down that list. And with a fine-tooth comb, I think, Ms. Yancey, thank you for a great starting point. Clearly, the community's got some strong views about which of these have to go or not. But we are going to have to go through this exercise. The consequence of not going through this exercise, and if it means shutting an elementary school or reducing we have to negotiate teacher ratios in classrooms. If it means doing those hard steps, what the superintendent said is probably something for next year, because the mechanics for this haven't gone away. It's not, this is the bad year and it's going to get better next year. The mechanics of the underfunded pension still exist. The probability that the California economy is going to flatten out compared to what's grown is likely. We're going to be having this conversation for multiple years. So, I think we probably ought to look at this list and add a few more things and then take off a few things. And I listened to everyone that spoke about the importance of building character through athletics as well as other programs. And I'm sympathetic to that view. But we can't take something off unless we have something to add. We have to get inside of our budget. So every time you say, well, exempt to my consideration, we have to come back with something we have to put on. And these 7 people here, finally, with the help of the superintendent and this public relations, not the public relations officer, the HR officer and our CFO, have to help us get there. So I'm willing to make some adjustments, and I've heard some tonight, but we have to take this very seriously. Anybody here, I'll bet you everybody in this room is involved in a business at some level outside of their involvement in school. And you understand if you don't have enough money to make payroll, bad things happen. If you can't cover your mortgage, the bank takes your house. We're up against some very tough things that have to be done. So I want to hear what we can put on the list as much as I want to hear what we take off the list, I guess, is my comments.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Gasson?
Yeah. Are we just making general statements or can
whatever.
Okay.
Whatever you want.
Well, I don't.
This is our board dialogue. We're just back and forth.
So I don't even know where to start. I guess actually, Yancy, just a clarification. Unfortunately, when you mentioned North Bay Security, I thought, oh, okay, we've got the SROs, and so it makes sense. We cut it, and then hearing it's actually like a mental health. Is that exactly what it is? A mental health counselor?
We're still finalizing what that would look like. One of the options is a drug and alcohol counselor. So one of the things we would potentially do is look for if there was outside funding for that. They also have several security officers that come and do much more than just security. And so that would be looked at. The whole contract would be looked at to that. So it is not finalized.
And I guess where I appreciate all of your work and actually all the comments from the community. It's extremely helpful. And, as everybody knows, this isn't easy. And, looking at all these things, there's just an impact, no matter what you decide to do. My inclination goes to the root of what we do and what we're supposed to be doing. We just hired a marketing company to go out and market the things that we do right. I don't know what that list is, but that should be where we look when we're making decisions, because if there are reasons that kids are coming to our schools, we don't want to affect and change that. I know that it's hard to not find things, that don't touch on that somehow. But, you know, my thing is, and I'm not a sports person, but I see in my family how important that is and here in the community. And I feel like we just spent a lot of money on getting our fields, or we're going to be spending a lot of money on something like that. And so, you know, cutting, you know, an athletic director from that kind of thing. I mean, I just, you know, making those connections. Like, if we're going to spend all this money, then why are we cutting the staff for something like that? I also was taking a look at the IT person. You know, I guess maybe I should take a step back. I spent most of the day at the Capitol this morning, and talking to Mark McGuire and I always say Mark. It's Mike McGuire and Mark Levine, and they were actually positive about the reprieve on the STRS. They were fairly confident that that would be coming through. So I guess my question to you is that if we do see that reduction in the contribution that we must do, is there a way we can put this into like a second tier? Can we put these things on another, you know, split it into two? We're going to do this, but if this gets passed, can we, you know, these are the things that we can just keep.
So in the second interim report that you will see next week that is being finalized, we are finalizing, so I don't have the final numbers, but I can tell you that there still will be a deficit for the 2019-20 year. And that deficit will only increase as the pensions increase, the pension rate increases. So, and the other thing that I will tell you is we use the per school services. We use the governor's assumptions in our budget planning. So that money is already included in our budget, although it is noted as funding that has not been approved. But we do use the governor's budget assumptions on anything that seems reasonable at the time. So in the second interim, you will see the savings from the approximate. So it's not they're not reducing the pension rates, but instead of a 2% increase, it would only be a 1% increase for 2019-20. And so the reduction from 2% increase to 1% will be in there, as well as the COLA, which is projected at 3.46%. And even with those two items, we will be projecting a deficit for next year. And so as Superintendent Hogaboom noted and Trustee Millerick noted, unless the declining enrollment slows and turns, or the state really increases its funding to a level that I do not expect, I expect that we will be running a deficit next year, and I don't believe that putting it into two tiers, because I believe that we will need additional budget reductions in 2020-21.
So, no, I mean, I fully understand that we're going to be going down and we need to do something. I guess what I'm talking about is this upcoming year. So you lost me. Is the potential 450,000 or whatever that we might have a reprieve on this next year, calculate this, we'd still have to cut this much?
We would still have to cut this much. That is
So-
projected into our, in January when we finalized the amount that we needed to cut. It was assumed that the 450,000, or it was about 350,000, that would be saved. So instead of the STRS rate costing about $700,000 increase, our projection coming in your second interim will be a $350,000 increase. And so that was taken into consideration when we came up with the dollar amounts in front of you.
Well, that's about, so all my ideas kind of just went out the window.
Sorry.
I didn't know that you were, I thought that was still just, being questioned, so I have to reset my head then, because, yeah.
Do you want me to circle back? I'll circle back
Yeah.
around, yeah. Trustee Cooper, then Trustee Miller, did you have?
So this district has been operating with a structural deficit for several years now, and we need to fix it, and I'm sure we will and we are. These are difficult discussions that we're having right now. I would personally like to not have to have this conversation. However, here we are. the things that stuck out to me were, we've been having the discussion of student wellness for certainly in recent times. And the two main topics that struck home to me tonight, the two of the big cuts that we're proposing, affect the wellness of our students, and that would be the AD position and our student athletes, as well as what we heard from North Bay Security. Not to say even the financial issue that he brought, or suggestion that he brought up, if he increase the ADA, revenues are increased. So there's that. I just think for me, it's about the student wellness, and we're talking about the ADs in particular who are contacting and mentoring and working with the student athletes. That's one group of our student population, but that's an important group, and they're helping them. All that said, we need to go back to this list and find a way to, if we're not going to do or scale back on those cuts, we're going to need to find something else somewhere else, just as Trustee Miller said. And with that said, I wondered, Yancey, it's probably a question for you. How can we, one of the items I was interested in was reducing cost of transportation and transportation savings of $25,000. What's that? How could we save money on transportation?
The transportation.
It's on one of the survey.
So we can reduce our funding in our transportation office. So a vast majority of all our transportation is around special education
right?
transportation. So basically, it's all required.
Right.
But there are ways that we can potentially add additional students on a bus and increase the ride time for some of our special education students. There's also ways potentially to pull out buses out of service and no longer do the required. There's significant required maintenance on any bus that could transport students, and certifications that have to be done on by the CHP on a fairly regular basis. And so we can take certain buses out of service, but that limits our ability sometimes on providing that.
Yeah, that's a maintenance of operation
Yes.
issue. So, okay, I just saw that on the list. I wanted some clarification. Also on the list, on the survey, one of the questions was reduce or eliminate conference budgets, and there's like $100,000 attached to that.
Yeah.
Can you talk to that? Is that something we can?
Absolutely. So that actually has been rolled into, if you look at the reducing district office and site discretionary budgets. In some ways, when we looked at what you could save from reducing conference budgets, we looked at conference budgets from across the district. But those conference budgets sit in the district office budgets. They sit at the site discretionary level. So some of them are double counted when you look at PD across the way. So some of the on the survey, they're going to be double counted in terms of that. So there is going to be significant decrease in the number of conferences, because really the district office departmental budgets and the site discretionary budgets being reduced are going to likely, because even though we note that they're discretionary budgets, a lot of these are pretty fixed costs in the district office and at the sites. So one of the real discretionary things is going to professional development conferences. So that is will be included in the district office budgets as well as site discretionary
Okay,
cuts.
because I saw there's a delta between the number on the survey is $100,000, and yet we're 55 here. So I just wondered if there was an opportunity to.
Yeah, there's an
I mean,
opportunity.
if we're talking about giving things back, or not cutting something, it's going to have to come from somewhere. I'm just trying to look at things.
It would. I would note that some, if not, a good majority of the cuts in district office are going to come. So we just can't cut it. We can't count the budget reduction twice.
Okay. And finally, I'd like to just say that I think we're at a point, this district is, that we need to start seriously looking at school consolidation or closing one of our elementary schools. That's impactful. A lot of this is 45,000, 20,000. We need to get a number that's going to be impactful, and I think that will, in our enrollment dictates that. That and increasing the number of class size, maybe by one. I would definitely be supportive of that. No one wants to do it, but I think we're at that position. We have to do something.
All right, thank you. Trustee Aguila and then Trustee Millerick.
Just wanted to thank the committees that have been involved that has brought us to this, to tonight, you know, the Budget Advisory Committee, Class Size Committee. I thank you all for your emails and for coming up and giving of your time and sharing with us the concerns. I agree this is very hard, and this is it's not the first time we've done this, but it's part of being a trustee. You know, I don't think anybody is arguing or just not believing that anybody, that any department or any person that we are thinking of cutting, nobody's arguing how wonderful they have served this school and this community. So with that said, I think everything that we have that is on this list that I look at, I don't think there's anything on that list that I would want to get rid of. I mean, it's so essential, and also the fact that everything works together. You know, the SROs with the North Bay Security, with counseling, with the teachers. I mean, it's just a big circle, and it wraps around. So I think that whatever we decide to do, it's gonna not just affect that part or that person or that department, but it would also, unfortunately, I see that it will affect. It'll be a domino effect. So I get it. So it's gonna be very hard. I just feel sick to my stomach just seeing the list and having to pick something. But I do agree. I think we should go back and take a look at some things that we have to be creative. We have to, and we have to be creative and take a look at a list and see what we can change or arrange. And so with that said, I'm wondering about the North Bay Security. Can you tell us a little bit about, well, I have two questions. What that would look like when you say, because in here it says reduce. Well, reduce is not eliminate. So if you can give it what you mean by reduce, and so that's one question. And then the other, just my other statements is I would also prefer to increase the class size, and then if we can take a look, if you can also explain a little bit about review and reduce overtime, where possible. If we can talk more about overtime and how it works, so that we can have a better understanding of some scenarios, and how by looking at that it could help.
So in terms of reduce, the North Bay security contract is a little less than $250,000, and so a reduction of about $67,000 is what is recommended, and so it's about a quarter of the contract that is recommended. In terms of the looking at reducing overtime, so we will do a deep dive into reviewing that. I just didn't want this board to believe that there's a lot of savings there. We only have $55,000 district-wide on overtime, which for an organization this size is very low. But it was very high on the list, and I think staff believes that we shouldn't be doing any overtime that is not necessary. So we will work to if there is the ability to even get $5,000 out of that, we will. It's not included on the list because I didn't truly believe that there was a significant ability to really cut that back, given most of it has to do with weekend time for our maintenance folks who are on call. And did you have a third question? I know you said supporting, yeah. What would that look like? So increasing class size, it's a little bit easier to do at the middle school and high school level. Their allocations of staffing is based on a formula based on a average class size. And so basically they say, at the middle school level, every student takes 6 classes. Every teacher teaches 5 classes. If we want an average class size of 30, that spits out exactly the FTE that you get, rounded to 0.2 because each teacher teaches 0.2. At the elementary school, it's a little bit more difficult because you can't really move kids around in different sections. Each student needs one teacher. But when we look at allocations, we look at the number of students, we look at the class size that we are looking at, and we would increase that by 1. To make an example, our staffing allocation for K through 3 is 22-1. That's how we staff. But our average class size is anywhere from 20.9 to 21.0. In that it has, because kids don't come in perfect little packets of 22. Sometimes we have class sizes of 19. Sometimes we have class sizes up to 24. But we're trying to average and allocate staffing on that 22-1 ratio. So it looks a little bit different at the middle schools and high schools. It's easier to do. The elementary schools, it all depends on what grades those students are and to how much really increasing our staffing allocation by 1 creates. But it does create savings.
Trustee Miller.
Couple of points. First, the athletic director, 0.8, is a $41,000 item. When we put the athletic directors on the schedule, and many of the people here this evening were here for that conversation, the conversation was we needed to see leadership in the athletic program. There were some problems that were occurring that just looks like somebody couldn't get their arms around the whole problem, and things were falling off for not enough attention. And we viewed this as a management role on the campus, and campuses at the high schools were lightly staffed in terms of management. And with remembering that conversation, I personally would choose to take the $41,000 off of this list. Personally, I don't know what other people think, because I think we need that management structure. I heard the 2 principals stand up and say, in order to herding cats is, I think it has more to do with high school kids on campuses or middle school kids. I mean, it's a challenge. I can't imagine anybody wanting to do that for a living, but here we are. And I think we found that when we didn't have that management structure in place, we had bad things happening. And we had some recent terrible things happen, but I would like not to reduce that management structure. So it seems to me, if we're going to save anything on this list, that's the first thing we ought to save. Both high school principals came forward and made it very clear that it would be a problem for them, and we know historically by actual evidence that we dealt with it would be a problem. So I would recommend that we pull that $41,000 off of this list. The other one that I would like to talk about is the IT program. We have some issues coming in IT that are not particularly obvious, and I'm concerned we're going to cut staff just as we're asking the IT department to do a significant amount of work. We approved at the last meeting conceptual design for a network at the high schools, and we moved forward on some technology that we got E-rate benefits from. There's something like 250 switches in classrooms that have to be reinstalled, plus all the work that has to be done, and that's not going to happen by August as we all hoped without enough adequate hands. The contractors will do some, but there's network configurations. That's half the issue. The other half of the issue is because we deferred the classroom furniture expenditures, that included replacing overhead projectors and the equipment so the teachers could instruct. What we're going to see is that equipment, Sean, our last IT director, had told the teachers not to replace it for 2 years. We had a significant technical debt. That equipment's old and breaking, and we're going to see maintenance costs of that equipment raised either in the way of bulbs or bulb replacement or maintenance. So I'm concerned when I look back at what we did in the last time we had a budget crisis under Jan Derby, we cut the technology program down to bare bones, and basically everybody quietly just didn't do a very good job of serving kids. And I don't want to move back into that let's not do a very good job but not tell anybody model. So I am concerned about this one position as a reduction from where we currently stand, and I'd like to have you talk to Tim Rocco and reaffirm where we stand on that, because he works for you, he doesn't work for me. And I'm concerned that that's a place that we are just going to stumble all over ourselves, because we're dropping an awful lot of capital money to upgrade that program, and if we don't have the hands on the tasks to make sure we're successful. So I don't know if that one should come off or not. I'm concerned.
I'm going to have Superintendent Hogaboom,
Yeah, okay.
who wants to respond to that.
So I'll give it a stab, and then Yancey knows more about it than I do. But, when we're making these cuts, we talk to everybody. And speaking to our IT director, Tim Rocco, he feels that that is a cut that they can absorb. He feels that with the current staff that they have, we might need to redo the way we're doing things. Maybe we can't necessarily afford to have one tech at every single site right now. Maybe we need to combine those, get a better work order system in place. But really, a lot of the work that they're doing is kind of the daily maintenance that needs to be done at the sites. It's not necessarily what you're talking about, which is installation of switches and all that. So as all I can say is relying on my staff and my IT director, when he thinks that he can make that cut and still make sure that we can service everybody, to the degree we need to do. I mean, if he felt they were at the breaking point, he would say, we just can't do that. But he really feels that, again, we're going to maybe have to do some things differently. Maybe we don't assign one person to every school. Maybe there's some other ways of doing that. But, I mean, I'll let Yancey speak further.
The new equipment's going to be more automated and allow some efficiency. So if Mr. Rocco's and you have had this conversation, then I'll accept the recommendation. I just wanted to be sure that in light of, and you talked about the kind of coming workload that we're going to see in the next year, I'm sensitive to what we did historically, which was we created such a huge technical debt. It took us 6 years to get back out from underneath it. I don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
So if you've had the conversation and it's a recommendation you're bringing forward up from staff, then that's fine.
I just want to note, I mean, obviously, Mr. Rocco is not, excited or thrilled to be losing a position within his, but when we talked about, what efficiencies can we provide to our current system? How can we look at a system who has a 1.0 tech at a school with 600 students and a 1.0 tech at a site with 1,400 students? How can we relook at moving that staffing around and providing? That being said, we are going to have to be more efficient, and we are going to have to put in systems to be more efficient. And then we're also going to have to, and this is going to be an interesting thing because we've never had it, is we're going to be rolling out a system where we're one to world, one device, and we're actually going to be having more than one device. And in a system where we've typically kept devices around way too long just to have those devices.
Okay. I'm in agreement with the AD position, so I have Trustee Mack and then Trustee Nell. Good idea. Thanks.
I'm going to borrow Trustee Gasson's microphone because the board has seen fit to take my microphone away from me.
We tried, and you finally noticed.
I want, actually the fact that the mic doesn't work is probably an example of what happens when you start to make the kinds of cuts we're discussing tonight, which are operational, foundational elements, in my opinion. But before I get into that, I was wondered to just kind of talk a little bit about process and where we are in things, and just a little tongue in cheek, you know, like how soon will we be Oakland? We have a little time. I mean,
I think we have a little time, but I think inaction is our biggest threat. If we don't make the amount of reductions here, the county office will be here in April. They will be here to tell us what will happen if we don't make much larger cuts next year, because we didn't make these cuts this year. And within 3 to 4 years, we could be under the 3% required reserve and in line potentially for what Sac City is in line for in October of this year when they run out of money. So I don't mean to note the sky is falling. I think the staff's recommendations right now are imperative to keep the financial stability of the district. But I won't tell you that if we do this next year, we're going to be Oakland and be in risk of receivership. But that's not more than a couple of years away. And if we don't make these cuts now, the cuts that will be required next year will be significantly more because we won't have the reserves to make it if we don't make those significant levels of cuts. So.
No, I appreciate that, and I think that the sooner you make a cut exponentially, it pays off more in the future. But at the same time, you don't want to bleed the patient out.
Absolutely.
With the cut. So it's important to be wise, and timing is important as well. So it's just, you know, if we were to come up with 1.7 at some point, then we're headed in the right direction, but we're not getting there. But we're ultimately facing what I think we refer to around here as structural issues. And so I guess the definition of structural needs to come up, because I've been here before, and I see when you start nipping and making little surgical cuts here and here and here, and you do it methodically year after year after year, you pretty soon you end up with really poor programs, not enough support for your your functioning operation. I mean, no one is going to be able to do their job well if we continue down this path. So from my perspective, structural really has to do with on the revenue side, where we're facing declining enrollment, because there's very, very little we can do about the pension issue, which is going to continue to increase, and we may never catch up with that problem. But I really wonder why we haven't spent more time on the declining enrollment and facing the reality of our elementary school issues. And I understand that children don't come in neat little cohorts of 22, but I have to say that I, for one, am a little disappointed that we're not a little farther along on this particular issue, because structurally, the problem is we have too many schools and too many teachers and too many classrooms for the amount of elementary students that we have, and the duplication of administrative, custodial, maintenance, and other operational funds, like keeping the lights and the air conditioning running, have a direct impact on our budget. So I think, from my perspective, the direction to you is, I know it's difficult, but this is difficult too, but we really have to go back into these elementary schools, and we have to decide how we're going to max out those classroom sizes, cut deals. I'm just spitballing here, but we're going to have to make something work, because I find it's going to be very difficult. One, I will not support cutting the athletic director. I also think that, based on the superintendent's opening remarks about the demands on public education and from our culture and how much it's changed, the burden of safety, shootings, other forms of bullying, not to mention mental health and suicide, we are being forced to deal with these things. So we can no longer say conventional wisdom is protect the classroom, because these other things are outside the classroom. Well, that's proving not to be working so well in the 21st century. And so I'm going to challenge the conventional wisdom. I'm going to say that we do have to max out our occupancy in these classrooms. Otherwise, the consequences are going to be far worse if we continue down this road and putting the health and safety of our children at risk with these kinds of cuts. So I'm hoping that when we come back, we take a look at this, that there'll be some, something there. When I look at it proportionally, you do list some certificated staffing cuts that come in at about 43%, but of that 43%, a third of that is classified, which is support staff. So I would really wonder why we can't get our certificated staffing FTE cuts up a little bit higher to solve this problem before we start cutting things like athletic directors and drug counselors in our high schools. I'm glad Trustee Miller asked the question about the IT, but I'm gonna somewhat disagree. I think that the investments in IT is just far too important. I probably all assume that the IT director is thinking that this is yeah, he'll do it, he'll make it work, but it's the future. So we're going in the wrong direction by doing that. So at this point, I understand from a priority perspective, it's a little bit farther down on my priority list, as I mentioned, the AD and the security firm that supports the drug counseling. But I have to say that I don't think that this is an area that we should be cutting at all in any way. In fact, we should be investing in our IT personnel. And I agree with Trustee Mulrick. I think that as we go through the implementation and installation of the infrastructure of our IT system, we're going to need people. And they're hard to get to work in public education as it is. So if we get a reputation for dismissing people, that's just going in the wrong direction. So I'm sorry that I don't have, a lot of great ideas, because I know how difficult this is, but what I'm trying to convey here to the board is priorities. And the priorities really ought to be structural. And structural is, we don't have as many customers, therefore we don't need as many classroom teachers. And that's where I'm coming from.
Back to Trustee Mack.
Thank you. Just a couple math questions before I just wrap up with some comments. I know our target is 1.5, right, in order for 1920 to balance. What we're really effectively trying to do is get a little bit of a jump start on 2021. No?
No. So, sorry, and I apologize. I should have made that clear. A portion of the cuts, so 1.5 general fund. The other 300,000 is to pay for the additional professional development day that the district approved in the most recent teachers contract when we moved a teacher work day to a professional development day, and those funds are directly to increase and improve services to our unduplicated pupil counts. So in order to put those funds into the professional development into the LCAP, an equal number of funds have to be pulled out. We didn't note that in the information to the community, or when we noted 1.5 to the community, that noted in addition to the 300,000 that was known that was going to have to be removed from that LCAP in order to fund that. So that's where the $1.8 million comes from.
All right, thanks for the clarification. That helps. One thing I would like to achieve, if we can, or maybe you can just outline what it would look like, the numbers, is if we were to look at this with an attrition-only type of approach, aside from the print shop. Where do we end up? And my kind of, paper pad adding up, it looks like it's about 1.72 or something like that. And I'd rather, because I'm in violent agreement with everything Trustee Miller said, as well as Trustee Nell. Not only do I obviously support the more than full-time ADs, because we know they work at least 1.4, and there's no one going to cover the 0.6 if they go down to 0.8. But anyway, obviously I support that. But I also support the IT investment. It is an investment, and we're about to spend a lot more on IT. We're about to have a lot more requirements, and it's just going to snowball. And to Trustee Nell's point, if we start cutting back and then having to accelerate hiring again, that's just a yo-yo, and it's not going to be easy for us to recover from that. So I really think that, as one of our audience members mentioned, being penny wise and pound foolish is not the way to do this. We needed to be bold. We need to be structural. And bold means looking at our elementary school population, looking at that structure. Do we really need to support as many campuses as we have when our enrollment is steadily declining consistently to the point now where the drop in, I believe, the last 5 years constitutes more than one elementary school in terms of enrollment? I believe it's 600 over the last several years, and typical elementary school is 450. We need to do it. And in fact, I would ask that we accelerate the process so that we could get better benefits sooner rather than later. I'm a little concerned, I'm actually a lot concerned that we're waiting on this until November. I would, as Trustee Hogaboom and I talked, I would much prefer we start pushing this now or into this spring. We need to, and it also too, to another audience member's concern, we need to do it not in a rush manner. We need to take time to do it, but I don't want to wait. I want to start it sooner and then have it progress properly and not be rushed and push the emotions, which is obviously going to be tough. That as well, though, not just bold cuts, not just changes in structure, we need to also get bold about our revenue. I'm a private sector guy, as a bunch of us here are, and it's not all about just cutting costs. We need to look at the top line. What can we do to drive it? I know we're starting there. We started with the marketing. We need to do more things that make that possible. We need to take a closer look at our leakage, if you will. Why are people leaving? And once again, the audience pointed out some of the reasons why, and we need to understand that and embrace it. So, point being, obviously I don't support the reduction in the FTEs for the athletic directors, but as well, I don't think we should cut the IT selection or role either. I think it's too important. And ultimately, if you do that, looks to me like the 183 goes down to about 172. Not sure what that means in terms of the numbers you have to balance, which I fully appreciate what you're doing. I always do. It's just that those are two things I think we have to try, not try, we will. In fact, I will not vote for anything that involves cutting either of those. That's where I'm at. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Gasson, and then we'll.
Oh, you left it on. Okay, so pretty much already said it, but I'm on the same page with the AD position. I'd like to have that taken off. What I was looking at was the instruction aid, that's already on here at a half. Is that what they actually currently do, or is that just reducing the hours for the instructional?
That would reduce that whole position.
So that's all that there is? They only have a half a position?
Currently, yes.
Okay. Well, there goes my other idea. All right. Well, so I also, I'm like going little numbers here. I have the same concerns, and I appreciate the additional information about the IT. I feel like we're building up that infrastructure, not having support, is a concern. I will leave that up to whomever, but I do have concerns over that. The other thing is the security contract. Now that I understand it more, I am actually very much concerned. I'd like to see what we can do to keep, the help that we do get from them there. So I would like to see if we can't do something about that. It may be that maybe there's a way to not do the as big of a increase to class size, that we're talking about. Maybe there's a way just to do a little bit, just to offset that. I don't know. And then going forward, I pretty much am on the same page as Trustee Mack in terms of, my daughter started school when we did the the new boundaries for the schools and stuff. And I actually have all this information that I had gotten back from then. And it's the same conversation. In fact, I thought I had paperwork from this meeting, and it was paperwork from 2011, because it was declining enrollment, lower birth rates, in all this. So it's been a long time, and that kind of discussion is painful, but I feel like we need to start looking at the elementary school closure and what we can do to alleviate some of the stress over that and do better that maybe has been done in the past. The other thing kind of touches on, again, what Trustee Mack was saying about the attendance. I don't know why we don't push harder in campaigning to let people know when your kid is not in school, that the school loses money. It's completely, it puzzles me greatly how we don't get money, even though we still pay for the overhead, we pay for the teacher, whether or not that kid is sitting there. So seeing if we can't have a campaign or more parent information about that. I know that we're not unique. There's, a lot of schools are having the same issue, but I think sometimes there's just a lack of awareness that, try to rethink those appointments, keep the kids. I know it's a great time to go skiing right now, but don't take them out of school, that kind of thing. Especially when we are getting down, and maybe that's what the messaging is, we are getting down to where there's not a lot left that we can cut. And if you want your kids to have a good education, you have to be part of helping us, support the schools and keeping your kids in school. And then the last thing is been touched on just in different ways, but I think we really have to get an understanding of, I have a list of reasons that people don't go to NUSD, but understanding those and saying, when we're looking at things, what is it that we need to really be aware of so that we're not increasing that pool of people that decide not to come here and we try to go the other way. And having that forefront so that when we're doing things, we figure, does this help this area of getting those kids back? I have a lot of friends that homeschool. I will say part of why I believe in the security is because that's a big piece of why they don't want their kids at the district, among other things. But, you ask people and it's the safety of my kid and how congested the schools are. So that's just my 2 cents.
All right, thank you. I want to wrap things up a little bit, not, put things in a little package here, and let's see if we can move forward a little bit, if that's all right, Trustee Miller. Okay. Thank you, everybody. It was great to hear everybody's thoughts on everything, and just to kind of bring this all back together, and I think you jotted down quite a few things probably already. I think there's probably agreement on the AD across the board here. Can I say that? Yes? And so remember, if we take something off, we put something on, and and we're under a little bit of a time constraint. I don't know if we really talked about that. This is coming back next Tuesday for a discussion action item to take action. Could we prolong it even longer than that? I'm assuming not.
No, we cannot prolong it. The County Office of Education will accept our second interim next week, and so that's where there is the first line. We also have regulations around ed code, around layoff procedures, specifically for our classified employees, and making sure that we do that process right and working with our partners in labor on that is an important thing, and that needs to be, and there's certain timing things. So, yes, we are in a time crunch.
Yeah, so there was some conversation about the North Bay contract and the IT as well. There seemed to be a fair amount of trustees that want to keep that on potentially. And then the school closure, it sounds like I think I'm in agreement with that as well, is bring that back. I don't know about starting it sooner or not, because no matter what, we're not going to close anything until 2021. We can't say we're going to close something in 1920. That would not work. So I don't know if we started earlier or later. I think we need to revisit that. And I think that was the four or so things that I had. AD, North Bay, class size. Could we say, this board say, we want you to increase class size at middle school and high school and bring that back on Tuesday? Is that a potential?
We can. I just can't promise that we can fully implement by 1920.
Okay.
We can at least partially implement by 1920, but 2021 would be the first time we could fully implement that, because we do have some timelines around layoffs that only can be met for the 2020-21 year. So the only way we could do that would be through attrition at this point.
Okay. All right. So yes.
I think we all agreed that the 41,000 for the athletic director is not going to be.
Right. That's what I said.
Did we agree that the IT person will not be part of it?
I didn't. I think there's a majority of the board is there. We don't have to all agree. There just needs to be somewhat of a majority. And from what I need. Yes. We'll make sure that we have it very clear. I'm going to ask Superintendent Hogaboom. He wants to speak.
So just a couple things. So I think, there's big bucket items for next year. You've already talked about the closing of the school, and I appreciate Azella and Ross, you guys being here and have that. We need to do that. That's whatever, 350 to 450. As Trustee Butler said, that's not going to happen for 20 to 21, and we'll just put the procedures in place to make sure we, first of all, identify a school, then do all the boundary closures and the communications to make sure that recommendation comes through for 2021. So that's the first thing.
But
The
I would
sec-
ask that we make it long as possible so that we don't cram it into a short amount of time like
Right.
we effectively did with Hill.
Yeah. Azella's already told us not to do that, so we're on it. The second big one, as you all have identified, is increasing class size. We can do that and still stay within our limits and all that, so that's another one we'll look at, primarily more for next year. And the third one that wasn't discussed but was part of the class size committee and the budget advisory committee is the parcel tax revision. That's another chance for a significant amount of money if we go out early for that. It's up in 2022.
Our current is through 2022, but the latest that we would go out for that would be the spring of 2021, given that it's over $4 million in our budget.
So I'm just mentioning that because I know there's divided opinions on whether we should increase it or put in an accelerator, but I'm mentioning that because it's probably one of the top 3 ways to generate some significant revenue. And as everybody has pointed out, you can only keep making these little cuts, for so long. And I think I think now we're getting to the point where that's it. I appreciate keeping the athletic director for all the reasons that have been saying before, and I think we need to do that. But you can't just keep on with those little, those are your big 3 things: closing a school, increasing class size, and going out for a partial tax division. So we will get on those 3 things. But I will say is, Yancey has said, we need 1.5 million. And I'm more than happy to take the athletic director off there. I think there's more than justification for doing that. But that means that we've got to put another 40,000 on there. And so if you add, we're telling you that your staff is recommending with the IT director's consent that we can lose one position and move the way around that we're doing some things, and we can absorb that. So if you're going to add another, whatever that is, 75,000, then you're going to need to tell us 75,000, you're going to need to then tell us what $110,000 right now we're going to need to cut. We can't just push it off and say, well, maybe we can get some class size reduction. So we're telling you, again, I think we can come up with some things for the AD, but the IT position, the North Bay security, and some of those things, those are the recommendations based on talking with the people in those that we feel we can make. And if you want us to take those off, then you're going to have to tell us what other 110, or if you add North Bay security, almost $200,000 of other things you want. It's a zero-sum game. So that's, and we've got a week to put together the final list for you guys, and we're happy to look at whatever the board wants us to look at. Again, I think the 40,000 is, we can take a look at it and come up with some different options. Frankly, I don't know where we'd come up with 200,000.
All right. Questions? North Bay IT and AD.
That would add up about 200,000.
200,000, a little bit more than maybe, that we'd have to swap out.
So,
And we can't just say, staff, go figure it out and bring it back on Tuesday, because
got a question
we may not agree with it. So
for,
that's
for Jim and Yancey, actually.
Yeah.
So the 6.4 attrition on certificated staffing, that's known, correct? That's what we have kind of already in the barn, if you will, in terms of attrition that's going to happen.
It's close, the number. We always look at our intent to separate stipend,
Okay,
which we have at February 28th.
Here comes Chris.
And Chris probably can answer this.
Well, my question is, so the 6.4 is where we're at now. Obviously, we have the remainder of the year. Historically, what's your take on what that number might end up being?
So I don't want to speculate. You guys aren't a board that likes to speculate and say we might have these resignations or retirements, so we might be able to make these savings, and I believe that's the wrong approach to take. We got to take what we know. You got to build your budget on the worst case scenario, and you can hope for a better case scenario. But I think shame on us if we speculate that we might have 2 or 3 more teacher vacancies that we don't need to fill. So,
Yeah, no.
to Trustee Millerick's point, we've already sent an FTE and a subject area credential of our intent to separate to them because they're already looking at that to match up with, because we are outside of the layoff window for our certificated staff. So they do know that, and they are monitoring that.
Okay. Trust,
The window ended on February 28th.
Trustee Gasson, do you have an amazing idea?
Well, no, every time I have an idea, someone tells me it was already factored in. And this is where, Ricky, thanks a lot. One of the things I suspect is already rolled, so I'm going back to this original list that was compiled by Trustee Mack with all the results from everybody, so we had the top list. So there's reduced curriculum department support staff on here. Is for 75,000, is that rolled into here somewhere?
So that was initiated in the current year, that a support staff from the curriculum department is.
This was from your recent budget survey. It was on the
I know
list.
there is another support staff up there, but that would leave them with basically no support staff.
Okay. What about and this I'm just not familiar with, but I'm really just trying to figure out where money is. We don't have any. Reduce or eliminate contracts for English learner strategies.
So that's included, sorry, I should have made that clear. The Kevin Clark Consulting that's included on
who
the
that
list.
is?
That
Okay.
is the English, that's part of those LCAP funds that I was discussing.
Because there's several professional development on here. I was trying to calculate them all up to get to 295. I guess then the question is, did we do as much professional development cuts I mean, there's like 4 or 5 line items on here, which I assume roll up into that.
They do. One of the issues with the items in our LCAP is I noted that we were moving a professional development day into that. Is anything that we move out of those would have to be replaced by a new and improved services to our unduplicated pupil count. So we knew we had some additional costs coming in for that professional development day. So we were able to cut out those contracts. The $295,000. But if we cut additional money out of our LCAP, we wouldn't actually get any general fund savings because we would have had to add a different services. And we don't have any other services that we believe right now that we can move that aren't currently in that. And we call it the LCAP, but it's those, it's the specific supplemental funds that we receive for our English learners, low-income students, and foster students. And so we get, in a way, they're almost a categorical fund. So if you move something out, you have to put something back in. Yep.
Okay, so this is where I'm at. I'm good with keep putting the AD, taking the AD off. I'm actually okay with everything else. We've gotten some feedback on some of those items. I'm gonna take a leap, and I don't like it, but I'm good with where everything else is on that list. Now, where do we find the 41? You know, I'm gonna throw something out there. The board has a budget. We have our stipend, and we have a budget that we use for membership fees for CSBA and things like that, which we have to have, and our board policies and things like, but we do have some travel and conference stuff in there. We could, as a board, say, you know what, I'm gonna take responsibility here. We're part of this, finding a solution as well, and just say, I'll fund whatever I need to do. Anything that I go do, I will fund. So if I go to a dinner, I'll take care of that. If normally we go to the CSBA conference, we'll eliminate that completely. And it's in San Diego for this year, it's in and then it's in Anaheim after that. So it doesn't come back to San Francisco for a while. They lost that. So there's a little bit of room there. It's very minimal. It could be 10,000. If we decide as a board we won't take our stipend for a year and see what happens, or for going forward. Yeah.
Too far.
Okay.
If in fact we do not get compensated for our site, your proposal seems.
Our little minimal of money that we could potentially save. Yeah. I mean, it puts us as, we're responsible. This, in the end, this is our decision, and so we can revisit our board budget for those, yeah. Yeah. Trustee Aguilar.
Yeah, and also another thing too is like not all 7 of us have to go to an event or to a dinner or to, so that's another way to get creative as well. So I would be in favor of that too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Right.
Facing
Right.
education. We don't need to make every mistake here all by ourselves. We need to be talking to colleagues around the state and learn from somebody else stepping in the wrong place.
We can still do all the things we're doing, it's just that the board members would be responsible. We pay for it. We used to do it. And then we brought it back because we had some funds that were available, and now it's time to, we could say some other areas too. So if you'd like, I can work that through with Yancy and Jim and kind of eliminate some things there. Trustee Nell.
I would support travel, conference, and pizza.
Yeah.
We take that out of our budget.
Specifically name services.
We do, we do get dinner. When we show up to a board meeting, I'm here at 5 o'clock, dinner is provided to us. It's very minimal. It does not cost a whole lot, but it does feed the 7 of us. We can eliminate that where we don't have meals. Diane will still provide cookies. So there's these are little blips in the numbers, but it's showing that the board is stepping up and taking responsibility in a small way. Yeah.
Just a quick question. I know that we haven't quantified the facilities use rental fee impact.
Yep.
Obviously, more study needs to be done. But can you articulate how much we're currently getting for facilities use rentals?
So we receive about $200,000 a year in facilities rentals. For a district our size, it's probably in the middle. There's definitely districts doing a lot better. One of the things that I've been starting to work on, and it's not fully formulated, but so I appreciate, but is looking at ways to incentivize facilities rentals with our sites. Right. Potentially some kind of revenue sharing models, maybe looking at that in a different way, maybe using our current levels as base years and looking at an incentive based on increases to that use. Because right now our sites don't have a lot of incentive to opening their sites up because it's additional use, it's additional trash, it's additional staff time to coordinate, when obviously, as Superintendent Hogaboom noted, more and more is being asked of them. But if I think potentially building an incentive model, we can. Really, I'm not going to build a budget based on that. But I think absolutely coming forward with some plans to increase that, absolutely. I think that is a...
Well, and also, too, I would just say, obviously, 200,000, a 20% bump, which seems reasonable, assuming with all the new facilities coming online, there's our 40 grand right there. But I know I'm making a leap, but I would advise us to look into that hard, because I think we'd be 20% easy, especially with the new PACs coming online, turf fields, even the STEM classes, perhaps. I don't know.
But budgeting the cash once you have it on a cash basis is one thing. Forecasting it's completely different. I wouldn't forecast any of that. If it's in the bank, you can count it. Yeah. Well, we can do that, but he should only put it in the budget if he's got it in his pocket.
Okay.
And that's what I'll do.
Do I have some consensus with what I proposed a little bit? With taking off the AD, they're going to come back with some other solutions for that 41,000. Staff will come back. I've put in the approach that we can take some funds out of our board budget, and we'll do that. Does that work for everybody? I don't want to.
I'd like to add also to take off North Bay security as times are getting harder, and our kids are needing more help. I think we're going the wrong direction, so I would like to ask that we take that off too.
Okay. Trustee Nell.
I don't like it, and maybe the approach is definitely not the ADs, and then after that, North Bay security, after that, IT, if we can get rid of PBI consultants. I don't, there were things on the list that you could add up here and there, but
We have some constraints with the LCAP
But
supplemental, that some of these
Yeah, I
things
got-
that are all
yeah, but
coming,
peop-
you know
I wasn't
that.
sure,
Yeah.
project-based, I'm not sure that's all LCAP unless maybe we stuck it all in there.
It is.
It is all LCAP.
It is
now.
currently all LCAP funding.
Never mind. But one of the things about North Bay Securities in the event that, I mean, it's not one of those, it's a private contract, so we can add and subtract a lot easier than we can with our traditional bargaining unit thing. So I don't like it, but just keep my fingers crossed a little bit, and maybe we can squeeze out a little bit more, so then we can come back at the last minute and reinstitute that if necessary. But I don't know, I hope, but we'll see what the May revise and all that other sort of thing comes up with, so, all right.
Okay, thank you
I wouldn't
for those
support
comments.
putting the
Okay,
taking North Bay off of the schedule we're gonna review. I wouldn't.
okay. Is there, so we have one trustee asking to put North Bay. I'm fine with what we have, like I said, and taking the AD only off. Where does everybody stand with that before we move forward?
I'm with Trustee Nell in that I think we have to stick with, we have a solution, let's
Yeah.
go with that. But to the extent that we have good news coming down the pike in terms of either more revenue coming in or more attrition going out, et cetera, and we have more flexibility, I'd like to prioritize what gets reinstated.
Sure.
And my take, per Trustee Nell, is, well, it's either North Bay or it's the IT position, but I'll go with the North Bay side of things just because it's probably, one, there's a specific call out for it, and two, it's probably easier to ratchet. I'm sure Bill likes that, but.
I'm in agreement with
Anyway.
that's a top priority.
Yeah, but yeah,
to-
so I guess prioritization is what I'm getting
Yeah,
at.
as
And maybe we start
pockets might
thinking, yeah,
come-
so you have advice on how to move forward as the budget hopefully, maybe, possibly gets better as we progress.
Trustee Miller?
So my concern is we don't start spending money we don't have, which is what we're up to here. I think we wait, and when that time comes, consider it. Remember, we're right on the knife edge of this budget balancing act. And if we put another $100,000 in the bank, we've spent $2 million a year for the last 4 years that we didn't have. So it's not like, oh, if you save a few cents, we need to immediately spend it. There's nothing wrong with leaving that go in the bank and then reconsidering it part of our next year when we look at things again. We don't have to run out and spend it. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to, if it's savings, let it be savings, and then a year from now consider it after we've had a chance to review the closures and other things where maybe we can actually then really restore some of this stuff because we have a bigger strategy plan. Because right now we're playing around the edges of the problem. We need the big moves.
I think as we've always said, well, what did we take off before? Let's make sure we revisit that first. And I think that will be this board's message when something, so let's go back to what, this list and say, okay. Trustee Gasson, and then I want to move forward.
So maybe just going along with that, maybe, having a projection. So we've got this that we're going over, then we have what we could potentially do for the next year, because the school closure is not going to be able to impact this coming year. It's going to maybe affect the following year. I have a little bit of a, not a complete plan, but kind of okay, this falls in this school year, this goes in here. And where I'm going with that is with the parcel tax and what we're planning on doing that. What do we see that potentially being able to do? Having a little calendar of events with that in mind. And then, because I think that's going to dictate a train of how we're going to need to go going forward. The other thing I just want to mention briefly since we're here, one of the things I wasn't aware of when I went to the Capitol today was that they actually have SCA 5 proposal about the parcel tax. Are you aware of that?
Oh, to change the voting,
They changed
55?
They were pretty optimistic about that today. Unfortunately, it was news to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be huge.
Yeah, it'd be huge.
Coming from, helping run the last one, so anyway, so again, with the timeline of all that stuff, that's actually looking a little more positive, if this is able to come through, too.
Thank you for that. All right, so Trustee Aguila, and then that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
So two things is one, just want to, address the fact that we still have San Andreas that we're looking at, and I know the timing is not, it's not around the corner, but we are, just to remind people that we are looking at that. And hopefully whatever we do cut can come back to us. The other thing is, you mentioned the top 3 things that you suggest that we may reduce, and one of them is the parcel tax. So far as of today, we're just talking about it. We're not, I wouldn't be, as you know, I wouldn't be in favor of it, but if you can, do we still have room for that discussion to see what else we can cut instead of having to ask the community for more money?
Yeah, so I think the parcel tax is one, next year is the closing of school, starting to look at that soon, looking at increasing class size, and I think a discussion about the parcel tax. If we increase it, how much would that be? If there's an accelerator, is there support for that? There's studies you can do to see that. So to me, that's something that we need to look at next year. Because we wouldn't go out for that probably till spring or fall of 2020 if we were going to do that.
All right, so let's, we've wrapped this up. Did you want to make a comment? I don't want to shut anybody down. I'm just trying to put closure to it. So,
Yeah, I just wanted to say it is unfortunate, some of these things we're talking about. I think the reality of it is that we're doing the right thing. We're doing the conservative thing. We're doing what we have in the bank, the money we have. I appreciate the fact that the board is, that we're going to be doing our part as well. And let's keep in contact with North Bay moving forward, and you never know. Thanks.
Great, thank you for that. So just to the audience and those that might be listening, the board did not finalize anything. We just gave direction to staff, and one of them was to remove the ADs off the reduction list. Everything else remains as is, and they will bring back on Tuesday where we will cover that 41,000 in another area, and one of them will be this board's budget. So it'll be an action item for these reductions on Tuesday. That meeting starts at 6 o'clock here, and this meeting's adjourned.